Probably smart. How you doing?
The TV screen in the back of the room is not on, but are we live? Thank you. It's my favorite thing to watch myself. All right, welcome to the February 17th Grants Pass City Council meeting. We're all in our seats, a couple minutes late. Let's have a moment of silence before we get started. And please rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a full council present tonight, and our first item on the agenda is a public hearing. So I have a little opening statement. At this time, I will open the public hearing to consider an ordinance amending the Development Code Articles 4, 7, and 13 regarding certified local government and historic resources. We will begin the hearing with the staff report, followed by public comment, and then the matter will be discussed and acted upon by the council. It looks like Brad is here with the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Yes, we have a few slides to kind of give you an overview on the application before you tonight. It's a certified local government application primarily. There are a couple of small items that aren't directly related to the certified local government application, but I'll clarify those in just a minute. So as you stated, Mayor, the subject here is the adoption of an ordinance that would amend 3 different articles in the Development Code. They're all related to the certified local government topic and a potential change to how historic structures are demolished and a review on how those would be handled. The relationship to your council goals is to support the council's goal to facilitate sustainable, manageable growth by designating the City of Grants Pass as a certified local government to enhance the city's historic preservation goals. So the first couple slides here are just to give you a little background on what exactly is a certified local government. As I'll mention in a minute, this actually is in the strategic plan. It was added in I believe, the 2019 strategic plan for council and has been carried over since. This is a 2-star item that the City of Grants Pass achieve a certified local government classification. So it is a program of the National Park Service that's administered by the Oregon State Historic Preservation Office, also called SHPO. And it's designed to promote historic preservation kind of at the local level. And it basically says that that U.S. code there, 470, says that for the historic preservation funds that go to each state, 10% of that has to be made allocated to certified local governments. And there are certain minimum qualifications to become certified and to qualify for federal grants, all of which are competitive. A few of the minimum requirements to become a certified local government are here on this slide. You do need to have a preservation commission, and you have to have an ordinance in order to become a certified local government. You have to agree to participate in updating and expanding Oregon's historic building inventory program, which is driven by SHPO. So if there are certain issues related to historic preservation that the state feels are important, and they could, ask the city for input, that's one of the things we would have to agree to. We do have to maintain a system for the survey and survey and inventory of historic properties, which we do. Maintain a process to designate local landmarks. So the city's had that in place for a long time. Agree to review and comment on National Register of Historic Place nominations in the city limits, and to affirm our obligation to enforce existing Oregon historic preservation laws.
Brad, I apologize. I didn't read the full admonishment, so I have to read the rest of this statement
okay.
before we continue. Sorry. Is there anyone present who wishes to challenge the authority of the council to consider this matter? Do any councilors wish to abstain from participating in this hearing or declare a potential conflict of interest? In this hearing, the decision of the council will be based upon specific criteria. All testimony and evidence must be directed toward those criteria. The criteria which apply in this case are noted in the staff report. It is important to remember, if you fail to raise an issue with enough detail to afford the council and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. We will now begin the hearing with the staff report.
Okay. I
You
think
don't
that
have to-
might have been the quasi-judicial reading, not the legislative.
No, I just didn't read the whole thing. I thought that it was, part of it was for later. Sorry about that.
And I'm going to interject for a moment. Thank you, Mayor. That will go for, it looks like we have a number of legislative land use hearings, so that admonishment is going to apply to all of them. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. This first one is legislative, and then yes, we do have a couple of ones subsequent to this that would be quasi-judicial. So in terms of the benefits of becoming a certified local government, the main one really is opening up a little bit more opportunity for grants that are not options if you do not have CLG status. The first one there that's mentioned is a $3,000. That's just a basic, non-competitive one upon CLG status, and then it also would allow for other competitive grants, typically between $5,000 and $20,000. Those can be used for a number of things, to conduct historic surveys. They can be used to actually prepare National Register nominations. So if there are historic properties in the city that are found to have historic value, those applications can actually be paid for through a grant. And then engineering studies and other things there. It does also open up opportunities for training, and then state and National Park Service assistance. So as I mentioned, this is a 2-star strategic plan goal. The Historical Building and Sites Commission began discussions on this more than 6 years ago. I haven't still nailed exactly when that was down. It might have even been longer than that. Councilor Pell may be able to clarify that, who was formerly on the HBSC. But it's been talked about a long time. More recently, HBSC has had a number of different meetings starting in October 2019. And then July, August, and September of 2020, those were all sort of workshop type conversations. And then there were 2 public hearings specific to this topic, one October 15th, and then the December 10th meeting is where the non-CLG item was added. And that's the final public hearing where the recommendation to the City Council took place. The application specifically proposes to amend 3 different articles, 4, 7, and 13. So the Article 4 amendments are pretty minor. The main one that I've identified there is to add a new criterion when you create or amend a historic resource, and it says consideration of the historic character, value, context, and integrity of the proposed district or landmark. So that gets added to the other three, and these are criterion if you're going to amend a historic district or create a new conservation district or something like that. You have to meet certain criteria, and this would be a new one. And then there were a few other cleanup edits. Article 7 has a few more, and this relates to HBSC itself. This article kind of gives you the guidelines for how commissions work. It does clarify the minimum qualifications for HBSC membership. This is coming from the state. They have a model ordinance that to become certified local government, you need to meet some minimum criteria. So the majority of what's being presented here tonight is required in that model ordinance. And this is one of those that you have to make reasonable efforts to appoint people with preservation, architecture, archaeology, community history, and similar expertise. Not mandatory if you really can't find somebody, but it's a strong preference, and you really have to make a good attempt to find these people. The second one adds a requirement to provide SHPO written comments for National Register nominations. Again, that's just if we are asked to comment on those, we need to do that if they're in the city limits. It also clarifies that the objection of an owner does not prevent a property from being evaluated and inventoried for the historic inventory and resource list. And then the last one there adds detail and process to designate a local landmark. And again, all of the specific language is in your packets tonight. And then the third article that's being amended under this application is the special purpose districts article. And this is the most substantial part of the application. And it adds 13 new terms to the definitions section. Again, all of those are new terms that are kind of used in the statutes and are required now to be adopted locally. It does remove the Oregon Administrative Rules citations. Instead of just giving the citation, it actually has the language in there, and again, those are outlined in your packet. It clarifies that historic landmarks are protected through a local HBSC review process. That really kind of ties to similar to what we're already practicing here in the city, but just adds some language to it. It does add 4 findings that have to be made if you're going to remove a historic district or a landmark designation. And those include things like, have there been lost qualities that were, when the structure or the district was originally created, now they have degraded or they are no longer on the building or something. Those can be factors that, to remove that district. Additional information shows it's no longer meeting the minimum criteria. Building official declares the structure to be a clear hazard. That would be another reason that it could be removed. And then the historic designation was imposed and the owners object. There's a couple of different nuances on that the state adds on there. Continuing on with a couple of other Article 13 amendments, clarifies that structures added to the National Register after February 23rd, 2017 do not require city review. This was part of the 2017 legislative session where they added this language in there. It also adds 8 factors that have to be considered when HBSC or by HBSC when a historic structure is destroyed, removed, or relocated. And among those 8 factors are the condition of the building, the age of the building, the value that it brings to the community, things like that. So those were all kind of the items related directly to the model ordinance in order to become a CLG community. The next few were added by HBSC and are not required in order to be a CLG community. The first one, it adds vinyl and plastics as materials that require HBSC review in the historic district. So that section is specific to certain types of materials, that if you're going to use them in the construction or in the remodel of a building, it would trigger an application that would have to go to the HBSC and not be handled at staff level. The next one removes vinyl and fiberglass as allowed materials on signs in the historic district. The next one adds glass as a permissible sign material in the historic district. And then finally, the item that kind of got the most conversation at HBSC and what triggered a couple of other meetings was adding a new section related to when a structure in the historic district is going to be demolished. Currently, the code does not give HBSC a denial option. It says you can approve with conditions, or postpone. But it doesn't actually give HBSC the ability to deny the demolition of a structure. As you may recall, the former LDS church at the corner of 4th and J was demolished at the end of last year, and that was kind of the instigator for this conversation. And so this language would put that as an option that the HBSC could consider. Certain criteria would still have to be met, and of course, any denial, if it went that way, could be appealed to the City Council. So for all of this that I just presented, the code says you have to meet certain criteria to approve it. Staff did that review, and HBSC did that review and found that these 4 are met. The 4th one really is not applicable. But the first 3, these amendments have to be consistent with the purpose of the development code and Article 13 in particular. And then they have to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Cost implication for this, it's a development code amendment, so it's fairly minimal. One of the budget implications, would, as I mentioned, open up opportunities for historic preservation grants. The general fund is identified there because in order to implement, the ordinance, it's community development staff primarily, which is general fund. But currently we have built into our application process, those are reviewed by our staff on a regular basis. We wouldn't anticipate the addition of this CLG language to trigger any new staffing. So the call to action tonight would be for taking the public testimony, of course, since it is a public hearing, and then to discuss the proposed amendments and deliberate. This particular item is legislative, so there is no mandatory deadline. You can approve, deny, or postpone. And if you were to approve, the last bullet there is to direct staff to adopt findings, to prepare findings of fact to finalize your decision. It is currently tentatively on your March 3rd agenda.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Brad? Joel?
Good presentation, Brad. Thank you. So going back to the 4 findings that are required to remove it from the historic register? Okay, right there. So I assume that it doesn't have to have those 4 findings of facts, it just has to have one of the 4, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so then with that, if it is removed from the historic register, then it can be demolished, is that correct? Regardless of the added language.
Right, so, the historic district has properties that have opted out. So it wouldn't apply to any of those. A map of our historic district looks a little bit like Swiss cheese. There's several, so it wouldn't apply to those. It also wouldn't apply, correct, if it's If it's in the district, though, then it, would still have to come through for a demolition.
Okay, even if it no longer qualifies, and we have one of these findings of fact?
I guess I'll have to check the code, and we also have Donna here to, we'll have to check on that.
Okay,
issue.
because that doesn't make sense that you couldn't, if it no longer qualifies and it was removed, that you could no longer, that, I mean, that doesn't, to me, that,
Right.
the logic doesn't flow through on that.
I do think that's correct.
So the other thing is, if we have historic buildings, which we do, and for some reason they're unsafe or whatever, and I'm sure that the commission would act reasonably in a manner, but if for some reason that those need to be demolished, there's a documentation procedure that CHIPA requires as a mitigation measure, is that correct?
If they need to be demolished,
Yeah.
yes.
And so what we do is prepare the documentation then of the historic nature of it so that that is preserved, correct?
You're talking about if an owner has a building that's on the register and
A building that's on the register that is going to be demolished, it has to be mitigated by documentation of the historic nature of the building for posterity, my English isn't very good, for the future generations. So for example, if we had the historic building that was going to be demolished, it has to be documented what the historic nature of it was and filed with the state before it can be demolished. Photos have to be taken, all those kind of things.
correct.
That's my understanding.
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, there's a clear difference between those structures that are National Register and those that are local landmark. The local landmark have less of a
Requirements.
standard and requirements than those that are on the National Register.
Okay.
DJ?
Yeah, I have a clarifying question. In the required amendments, that's 7.0654, clarifying that objection of the owner does not prevent property from being evaluated and registered. Does that prevent an appeal from the owner or anything like that? I'm just not familiar with the process. So if you could help me understand what exactly that means.
Sure, so this section is specific to just creating a historic inventory, which is, just the list. It doesn't relate to being a landmark or becoming a National Register property, is maintaining the list. And so it's saying that the HBSC could, do its investigation, look at the historic records, go to the courthouse, go to the museum, pull that and do that kind of analysis on the value of that being on the historic inventory without getting the owner's permission. Now, I can't tell you why the state put this in there. I don't know what the triggers were for that, but again, this is one that is in the model ordinance.
Okay, I understand that better. And then referencing that against the other slide that you had open about demolition, can you go back to that one? So that fourth bullet point on the bottom, the historic designation was imposed and the owner objects. And so that gets into sort of the right of an owner to appeal or otherwise?
Yes,
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
Rick?
Thank you, Brad. I'd like to continue what DJ was saying. So if the owner objects, if the current owner has the property registered, but a new owner buys it, does the new owner have that right to object?
There is specific language that the state added that defines what an owner is, and you're getting to that nuance. Page 23. Yeah. So It defines an owner there. I think that's the one in the definitions.
Because what I'm looking at, if somebody goes to buy a building and they're totally locked in by the previous owner, does the new owner have an opportunity to, I want to say appeal, but file to declassify?
So yes, section 13.435 adds some more, this is a new section, and it says that the owner requests in writing that the local government remove the property from the resource list. So that would potentially be a new owner.
Okay, thank you. I have two other questions. As far as the designation goes, the ultimate designation is the National Register. That's the highest. And then under that would be the local landmark. So there are two levels?
Right. The local landmark is the one that's designated here locally at the city.
Okay. And last question, on the signs, you said vinyl will not be permitted? Or it has to have review?
So that's the materials that require HBSC review. Currently, River Rock is one of those, corrugated metal is one of those, and then a third one would be if you're using vinyl or plastic.
Okay, so it's still, a lot of signs today have vinyl letters on them, and I didn't know if that would then, instead of being painted on, they have vinyl letters, so that would go for the review as well.
Well, again, we're talking about two different things here. This section, the vinyl, is for use on the building. That's what would require HBSC review. If you're talking about a sign,
Correct.
HBSC added that as a prohibited material.
That vinyl cannot be used?
Yes.
So you could paint your sign, but you can't use a vinyl sign?
As it's in this ordinance before you, that's correct.
And that's set by federal, state, or local?
No. This is the section that I clarified is not part of the state model ordinance. So this was a local. This is a local decision. So
Okay.
the HBSC has recommended this to be changed.
And if somebody wanted to have a vinyl sign, they go through the HBSC, and if they deny it, then it's eligible to come to the city council through an appeal process?
Well, as it's currently drafted, it wouldn't even get that far. It would be denied at the staff level because it's in here as a prohibited material. So if you came in with a sign that had vinyl or plastic, it wouldn't even get through the gate.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions for Brad? Thank you, Brad. Oh, Valerie?
I just want to restate that, because I'm on that page, I think, where it's talking about materials requiring HBSC review, and that includes river rock and other round materials, corrugated metal panels, vinyl, and any form of plastics. So you're saying that because it requires an HBSC review, that you wouldn't, it would just automatically be turned down before it would ever?
No, that particular section that you're reading, Counselor, is saying that if you come in with a building permit, say you're reciting your building, or
Okay.
you're doing some kind of modification, and you're proposing one of those three materials, it could potentially be approved.
Okay.
But it would have to go to HBSC. It wouldn't be able to. Most of the structures, if you're coming in with allowed materials, they can be approved at staff level.
Okay.
And they, so
Okay.
you don't have that extra step.
Okay, but if it comes in with those, then it has to go before the HBSC. And I guess my question goes back to what Rick said. If HBSC denies it, is there something appealable? Would that be something appealable to the council?
Yes.
Okay.
All of their decisions are appealable.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Brad?
Thank you.
Brad. All right, at this time, is there anyone from the public who would like to speak in favor of this ordinance, proposed ordinance? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the proposal? Please come forward and tell us your name and
Thank you, Mayor Bristol, and congratulations on your office, and congratulations to the new people. My name is John Bowen. I own a historic building at 234 Southwest 5th Street. And first of all, I'm not opposed to the intention of all this. There's just a couple things I'd like to detail. One is the notification of the property owners for this, what I'll call sweeping policy. I did not receive any notification of this. I understand HBSC meets monthly, has what they'll call public hearings, but unless we know there's a topic at hand, people aren't going to show up. And so there was the normal policy for these kind of things is you get mailed a letter so it's brought attention. So notification concerns me about this and would like some consideration on that. Secondly is in the discussion tonight, and a few years back, I used to serve on the HBAC for some 6, maybe 7 years, and up until I think about 15. And the getting the certified government was an early process, so yes, it did go a long time. So I understand the value, and I'm not fighting it today, but unfortunately today what's happening is we're lumping along 4 other things that are kind of on the wish list of the HBSC that are sweeping. And if you go back a few years back, we expanded the historic district and we allowed people to opt out. Well, what we did is created a checkerboard effect. And had people been aware of this, maybe more would have opted out. And so I really want to just call attention or just find out what sort of notification took place so that people understand. Because what I'm hearing tonight is now the next charge with the HBSC is they can start inventorying. Well, I hope everyone knows that to qualify as a historic building, it's not one of our beautiful brick buildings. It just has to be 50 years old. Or it might be 60, but either way, what we'll call a young building. Most of our buildings are well beyond that here. And so now we have this checkerboard effect of historic buildings. This guy can have vinyl because he opted out. This guy can't. We need to standardize it and make it really workable and fair. And in these times where economic development and helping our business people, to rule out vinyl, which is the most practical thing, and the materials can be historic looking to the upteenth, just to give that blanket thing is an economic detriment to the buildings, to the property owners and buildings. So I just ask that that be considered. And then the other thing that I'm really concerned about is this demo thing. I understand the intention behind it, and it's well intended, and I support that. But that's a property rights issue, and so again, if you're going to add something that big, the notification should be there. And just an example, my building, the steam laundry building, we had a demo part of that, but we replaced it with an appropriate thing. Well, it's real easy to say, John, under this new policy, you can come back and appeal. But when you do, that's basically 6 months just to get through that process, because now it has to get scheduled at HBAC. They rule, go back maybe for another hearing, you get the point. And then meetings have to be noticed, then you guys get involved. And so this extra layer of burden, I think, let's look at the real intention and find a better solution. Thank you.
Thank you. John Bowen, we have a question for you.
John, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So I understand what you said about the notification, and I tend to agree with you. What exactly are you proposing in regards to preventing that checkerboard effect in regards to this ordinance?
Well, I'm concerned about the checkerboard effect because I want a historic district. I want the protections in place. When you have the checkerboard effect, you're going to have certain properties in and certain properties not. The certified local governments is kind of part of it, which I support the idea, but part of it is going to encourage new inventory. And suddenly, are we going to expand the district? And what happens there? So I just want to make sure that's all sussed out. It's not up to me to say which is right or wrong, because I do like historic preservation. I'm committed to it. But we just need to be cautious of that, because it does affect the property rights of the individuals. And it's clear, when you go into HBSC, it's a subjective thing. I'm so glad that they're addressing the makeup of the body. We don't have expertise in there. Everybody's good intended. Everybody's got the right thing in mind. I'm not questioning that. But a lot of things when you go in, it's scale, it's ratio, it's color combination, and the period, understanding the period and the materials. We have different types of period architecture in our town, and so one brush doesn't apply. And so these sort of things need expertise, and I would encourage that we follow through with the SHPO recommendations on that aspect of it.
Thank you, John.
Valerie has a question.
Yeah, my question is, you talked about the four of them and clumping them all together. So it's my understanding that you're saying the first ordinance, which is amending the actual development code, is the one that probably needs more notice. I'm going to assume the Memorial Park, Grants Pass Pharmacy, and Redwood Empire signs are ones that we can all know that don't need to be noticed. But I'm just clarifying. So it's basically the first part, the legislative ordinance, that you're contending probably needs a little bit more vetting. Am I correct?
Correct, and
Okay.
yeah, those landmarks isn't the issue, although I do have a comment on Redwood later. But and then the four that seem to be added at the end, you know, the vinyl, the demolition, those are, to me, property owners should be aware of that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, does staff have any further comments? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. Please come forward. Tell us your name.
Wanted to comment against as well. Doug Walker. I wanted to add that I thought that the portion, and this is the first time I've heard about this, but the portion described as denial of demolition seemed a little sweeping. There are some properties in town in the what I would assume would become inventory in this that would qualify as over 60 years old that probably should be demolished at some point if somebody were to come along and want to develop something. And I think the LDS Church on J or whatever street it was is a good example of that. And having a sweeping right to just deny the project because of HVAC has a right to denial of demolition, I think is a bit sweeping in that sense. And that maybe should be curtailed, or some language should be added for some way around that. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on this issue? All right, does staff have any further comment? All right. The matter is now before the council for your, oops.
Sorry, I was just going
I'm
to add.
off tonight, huh?
Just for clarification's sake, the notification for a development code amendment was published in the Daily Courier. It was posted on the website. It was put into the DLCD application. So just to clarify, on these amendments, there are no mailings that get sent out to individual property owners when they affect the entire code. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you. All right. We'll try this again. The matter is now before the council for your consideration, and DJ.
So it seems to me that we have some legitimate concerns here. I think that, I think this is a good initiative overall, but notification procedures and some concerns about sort of spotty application and different materials, I think deserves to be looked at.
Rick.
I like what DJ said. I would, if it would be possible, I guess I would be in favor of trying to do a notification individually to the property owners that have historic designations on them to be aware of this, and also to get further input on the use of vinyl.
Valerie?
Yeah, I'm going to pretty much say the same thing. I am in favor of the CLG and moving towards that. I know it's not just historic, but there's been several different committees that have talked about the importance of that in order to get grants and to get the recognition, which I think we all value, the downtown historic district. But, you know, we've had problems and people being frustrated with not being notified. And I do think this is a pretty big thing, because if you're a property owner and suddenly something just kind of zips by you and it ties up your rights to do something with your property, to me, I think that's pretty important that they're notified so that a discussion can be had before something like this goes through, so they understand it as opposed to after the fact. So for those reasons, I would like to have it slowed down so that we could do some sort of public noticing of the owners in the historic district so they're aware of the changes.
Rob?
Yeah, I would agree that noticing is very important. I'm very consistent on that. I said that yesterday on a very similar land use issue. It's interesting to watch people flip-flop on that, but I agree. Yesterday I thought noticing was important. Today I think noticing is important. So for the council to be consistent moving forward would really be a good thing. I'd also like to, I have to take issue with a few things. One is, I'm not sure if it's clear to the council that any decision made by HBSC is appealable to the council. So it doesn't really matter, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. If the HBSC turns something down, there'll be reasons. Then when it gets appealed to council, council will have a better understanding as to why that occurred. Because quite frankly, I don't think anyone on the council really has an in-depth knowledge of historic, much of anything, quite frankly. No more than the average person. So if HBSC were to deny something and it got appealed to council, that's a tool that council has for better understanding. And council is the final arbiter on all issues. I also have no idea where Mr. Bowen came up with the idea that it was going to be 6 months for an appeal, because that's just not factually correct. As far as what Doug Walker said about the demolition, again, that is 100% appealable to the city council. So the thinking is that if you have a building that maybe is around for 100 years or more, what happened was actually, and it's still happening, in Portland especially, there were major battles, and developers would go in to potentially a beautiful historic neighborhood. They might buy a historic property with the intent of demolishing it and building something that might be more profitable, regardless of design. So basically, neighborhoods were up in arms about that, and because it was diminishing the value of the entire neighborhood to have kind of mixed architecture. And this is all real stuff that happened in Portland, and this is why these issues came about. So similar here is that if you have a 120-year-old building and a developer comes in with the intention of demolishing it, okay, well, that's fine, but sometimes the historic commission can say, yeah, well, there's certain conditions. Sometimes the developer bought this with the intention of bulldozing it, end of story, doesn't care about the rest of the neighborhood. That's where a denial comes in. And then that developer can then take his or her case to the city council. So this is not really increasing we'll say, the scope or the power of the HBSC, because the scope of the power of the HBSC is totally subservient to the power of the council. So with regards to demolition, I have to say a really good example of making really good use of that process, but it really pointed out the need for denial to be an option, was Nathan Miller's project at the corner of 4th and J. He bought a historic building, and quite frankly, at the time he bought it, he didn't even realize all the reasons it was historic, and those all became more clear as time went on, although he knew it was the first Mormon church in town. He didn't realize the social clubs that had met there for many years. There were many other aspects. He bought it with the intention of bulldozing it, which is fine because it really didn't seem like it was going to be economically feasible to do much with it in that form, unless you had some kind of historic angel come in and buy it and restore it and not care if they lost money. So he wanted to make some money out of the property. And in that process, he was actually quite willing, because he could have actually basically just walked away and said, I'm going to appeal this to the council, and the council probably would have rubber stamped it because it added more housing. But he actually was educated, and he actually got to see. And he's going to maintain and incorporate the spire from the old church. If you go past there now, you'll see the spire standing on the property. He's going to incorporate that. He's going to incorporate the several octagonal windows. There's going to be a plaque on the property. And these are all things that are going to pay homage to basically Joel's point. It's not just on paper that history would be served with notification that, hey, there was a historic property there. There'll actually be a plaque and a memorial on that property. And that all came through our working with the property owner when we were discussing the demolition. That all came through, and he was agreeable. He saw the value to that. He saw the increased value to the community and his property as a result of that. You know, had he not wanted to be flexible and if he didn't want to appreciate and preserve some of the history there, denial might have been appropriate, and he could have come to the council. But at least at that point, the council would have known why it was denied and what we had asked him to do, which is fairly minimal. And quite frankly, when he came back with it, that's on the demolition side. When he came back on the planning side, he had his plans drawn up by a historically savvy architect, George Kramer. And even when he brought it back, there was at least 4 people on the commission who could see certain aspects of that project as designed really needed to be upgraded, or could be upgraded fairly easily to be more historic, to embrace historic design, to embrace the character of the era. He's got 2 buildings there that are sort of supposed to look about 20 years apart as far as the eras go. But these were all things that George Kramer had suggested, and the details that we came up with to help him make a better project. And he actually said the night that was approved that he thanked the commission. He said that actually it was a much better project because of that whole process, because of our weighing in on the demolition side of it and our weighing in on the design side of it. So I also want to say that anything that I'll leave this up to Brad, but any material that is not necessarily approved at the staff level for any project can come for review to the Historic Commission. And there's times when some of these materials can look very, very, very close to the real thing. And, you know, at that point, you know, is it subjective? Yes, it is subjective, but that's why you appointed a commission, and these are people that you chose. But anything that is a prohibited material can come before the Historic Commission. The Historic Commission turns it down and then goes to the council. So as far as the noticing aspect, yes, I'm in agreement with that. I wish the council would really embrace that in all instances across the board, and we all know who didn't really care about that yesterday. But as far as noticing, yeah, that's probably a valid point. As far as the demolition and some of the other things, the council's the final arbiter, so there's really not an issue with a runaway board taking too much power. Thank you.
Brian?
I appreciate the concerns, and I appreciate what Rob has said, and the fact that any of these decisions is appealable to council makes me comfortable with this. And I came in here tonight prepared to vote yes, so I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to adopt the Development Code text amendment for Articles 4, Sections 4.045 through 4.047, Article 7, Section 7.060, and Article 13, Section 13-400, Historic Resources, Districts, and Landmarks, and all subsections therein, and have it read by title only, first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Rob? All right. Brian, do you have a comment? No? Does anybody else have discussion? DJ?
Yeah, just for the sake of the concerns brought forward, it's my intent to vote no on this, to at very least give another couple weeks to consider the concerns this evening.
Rick?
I will also be voting no because I feel it would be just a nice gesture to the property owners to let them have the opportunity to provide their input. And also I would like to hear from like 2 different business sign people and what their input, if they have any, on the vinyl issue.
Further comment? Joel?
Well, I think the people on the committee too, for the most part, would agree with that, and I don't think they would object to that. Sometimes we need to go slow to go fast. I think we've seen that many times throughout our life and in the recent past, so. And I know Rob also supported that, so I think that's a good way to deal with our community.
Is there further comment? All right, we'll call for the vote. De La Grange?
Yes.
Ogier?
No.
Riker?
No.
Phaser?
No.
Lovelace?
No.
King?
No,
Pell?
No.
All right, motion fails. Further discussion on this item? DJ?
Well, I'd be in favor of bringing this to a date certain. I'm just not privy to what that date certain should be, given the motivation from HBSC. So any input on that would be appreciated.
I like a date certain. If staff could provide us.
We can provide you a date certain, but I think we'd need further clarification on exactly what actions you'd like us to take in the meantime. If you're wanting us to provide notice to all of the property owners in the historic district and have a discussion with them, et cetera, then we would need some time. Or if not, you just want a couple of weeks to rethink about this, then that's something different. So I'd need further direction to determine what that date certain would be if you want to keep this open.
So yeah, the idea would be the notification concerns, getting some input on that, getting also input on the materials. And I think that having HBSC understand the position of council so they have an opportunity to respond to our concerns. So at the very least, to be a date certain after the next HBSC meeting, which I don't know when that is.
So, date certain wise, providing that notice, getting that information, allowing HBSC to take a look at that and be part of that process. I would probably say the soonest would maybe be April 21st. Potentially even, to be safer, going to May 5th.
Yeah, I'd like to move to reevaluate this on April 21st.
Is there a second? Rick? All right, so we have a motion to postpone this hearing, leaving it open for public comment, I assume? Okay. Until April 21st. Is there discussion? All right. Call for the vote. De La Grange?
Yes.
Ogier?
Yes.
Riker?
Yes.
Phaser?
Yes.
Lovelace?
Yes.
King?
yes.
Pell?
Yes.
All right. The hearing is postponed until April. We've had a slight change on the next couple of public hearings here. The city attorney has asked me to read the quasi-judicial admonishment. So, and I'll just read it once for all three items B, C, and D. At this time, I will open the public hearings to consider applications designating the Croxton Memorial Park, Grants Pass Pharmacy, and Redwood Empire sign as historical local landmarks. We will begin the hearing with a staff report followed by a presentation by the applicant, statements by persons in favor of the application, statements by persons in opposition to the application, and an opportunity for additional comments by the applicant and staff. After that has occurred, the public comment portion will be closed and the matter will be discussed and acted upon by the council. Is there anyone present who wishes to challenge the authority of the council to hear this matter? Do any counselors wish to abstain from participating in these hearings or declare a potential conflict of interest? Are there any counselors who wish to disclose discussions, contacts, or other ex parte information they have received prior to this meeting regarding the application? In this hearing, the decision of the council will be based upon specific criteria which are set forth in the Development Code. All testimony which apply to this case are noted in the staff report. If you would like a copy of the report, please write that on a note to the city manager and one will be provided. It's important to remember that if you fail to raise an issue with enough detail to afford the council and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The hearing will now proceed with a report from staff. Hello.
Hi. I'm sorry I wasn't listening. I thought you were still doing the admonishment.
I put you right to sleep, didn't I?
I need a little assistance from Julie to get this up on the screen. My name is Donna Rupp. I'm the associate planner. I am the staff liaison for the HBSC, as well as Brad, of course. I've prepared 3 separate PowerPoints for each one of these local landmarks. I didn't know how council wanted to address them. I could do each one individually, get comments, or I could go through all 3.
I think we need to do each one separately. So
Okay.
first on our agenda is
Very good.
Croxton.
Thank you. Okay, so item 1B is for Croxton Memorial Park as a local landmark designation. The subject and summary is to designate it as a local landmark per section 13.400. The inclusion in our local landmark list will serve to meet the intent of the Historic Preservation Ordinance for the cultural impacts that it offers. And of course, it has a relationship to council goals to encourage economic opportunities and provide cooperative shared leadership involving council staff and especially the community. So I don't know who here is familiar with the park and location, but maps provide a good little background. It is located north of the high school on Memorial Drive and a little bit west of Lincoln Elementary and between Northeast 9th and 10th Streets. The HBSC voted to recommend approval for local landmark designation of this site at their December 10th, 2020 meeting. Pulling from your staff report that you have in your packets, this information is just a slight review of what you already have there. It was originally deeded to the city by Thomas Croxton as a cemetery in 1887. It was put in his will. Prior to that, by about 20 or 30 years, he gave it to the city, but the will made it official. And it was later dedicated as a park. So the subject property is really interesting in that it represents the founding of Grants Pass. Thomas Croxton, in the material that I read, he actually came up with the name of Grants Pass for the post office. He was the first postmaster in the city. And the tombstones that were in this cemetery kind of tell a story of what Southern Oregon was like during the early settlement. One of them actually said killed by a grizzly. So it's very interesting. Over the years, there was vandalism there. It fell into disrepair. And in 1961, there was a survey conducted of all the tombstones, and they tried to track down the relatives. They took all the tombstones and put them in storage to protect them from further vandalism. And then during the country's bicentennial in 1976, the park was dedicated as part of that entire celebration and project that the city had. These are just a couple of photos to show you the park and what they did with the tombstones for the park dedication in 1976 was to take the remaining of them and put them in a memorial in that circular structure. So what we do for all of these landmarks is we look at our criteria that's located within the development code. And for a local landmark, our current criteria covers these 4 topics. And the staff report addresses each one of them. So it serves the purpose. Number 2 doesn't apply to landmarks, but I put it in there in case somebody said, well, where's the 4th one? We consider the positive and negative effects of the designation upon residences, businesses, or property owners of the area, and also the historic character, value, context, and integrity of the proposed landmark. And the HBSC, as I mentioned earlier, at their December 10th meeting, found that Croxton Memorial Park does meet all the criteria for designation of a local landmark, and they recommend to the City Council approval. As this is a quasi-judicial land hearing, I better slow down, there is a call to action date of March 19th. So the council can approve the request as submitted with conditions stated in the staff report. Other conditions can deny it for the following reasons or postpone the item. And that's my presentation on Croxton.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Donna? Valerie?
I just have a question, because I didn't see it on the slide, but you said Croxton was the first postmaster, am I correct? Was it Croxton who was the postmaster? Okay.
Yes, the material I read through said that he was the first postmaster.
Okay. Yes, I find it very interesting. I taught at Lincoln for 25 years, and I always took my kids up to that park, and especially when I taught 5th grade Oregon Trail, so I am very familiar with that place.
Good.
So, love that
Thank
history.
you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Donna. At this time, is there anyone here to speak in favor of this? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? All right. Does staff have any further comments? No? All right. At this time, the matter is now before the council for your consideration. Rick?
I'd like to move to adopt the ordinance designating Croxton Memorial Park as a historical local landmark and have it read by title only, first reading.
And I see a second from Vanessa and Brian and DJ. So many seconds. All right, is there any discussion on this? Rob?
Just very quickly, I have to say that I actually hadn't gone into that park until 10 or 12 years ago, and anyone in the room who hasn't been there, it is a real history lesson, reading the headstones, understanding what child mortality was like, how many young kids died, what they died of, settlers who came across the country, how long it took them. It's all there in the headstones, it's all there, and it's pretty amazing. One other thing is that we actually have a descendant of Thomas Croxton on our historic commission, and she is an unbelievable wealth of knowledge. If there could ever be an expert in Grants Pass historical issues, she is a living encyclopedia. There is no one in college that's going to learn about Grants Pass history the way, the way Ginger knows it. So it's wonderful that we have an expert like that on our commission, and I know that she would be very happy and proud to have this memorialized in this way.
Thank you. Further comment? Brian?
Yeah, while we're on the topic, I grew up 2 houses down from this park, so I've spent a lot of time there, and I'm frankly surprised it hasn't been designated a historical landmark before now, but I'm glad we're doing it now.
Further comment? All right, we'll call for the vote. So the motion is in favor of designating Croxton Memorial Park as a historical local landmark. De La Grange.
Yes.
Ogier.
Yes.
Riker.
Yes.
Phaser.
Yes.
Lovelace.
Yes.
King.
Yes.
Pell.
Yes.
Motion carries. Unanimous. All right, next up we have Aaron. Read it for the second?
Julie needs to read first reading, then we need to go into a second reading.
Okay.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass designating Croxton Memorial Park, 1001 Northeast Memorial Drive as an historical local landmark.
Valerie?
I would like to move to adopt the ordinance designated Croxton Memorial Park as a historical local landmark and have it read by title only, second reading.
Thank you. Second by Joel. Discussion? All right. Vote. De La Grange.
Yes.
Ogier.
Yes.
Riker.
Yes.
Phaser.
Yes.
Lovelace.
Yes.
King.
Yes.
Pell.
Yes.
Julie, can you please
Ordinance.
read it?
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass designating Croxton Memorial Park, 1001 Northeast Memorial Drive as an historical local landmark.
Thank you. Is that ready to move on? Okay. Next up, we have an ordinance, public hearing on a proposed ordinance that would designate the Grants Pass Pharmacy as a historical local landmark. And Donna again with the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of these slides are the same, so you have to forgive me. The topics are the same. Designate the Grants Pass Pharmacy as a local landmark. It'll serve the intent of the Historic Preservation Ordinance, and it relates to the council goals through encouraging economic opportunities and providing cooperative shared leadership involving council staff and the community. So the background on the Grants Pass Pharmacy, this application was actually submitted by the owner of the pharmacy. She is the pharmacist there now. It is a special character. It's located at Southwest 6th Street in the Central Business District. And again, the HBSC voted to recommend approval at their December 10th, 2020 meeting. So this subject property is listed as a contributing property in the Historic Resources Survey and Inventory of the Central Business District, which was conducted by George Kramer and Jill Chappell in August 1992. It was built around 1900 in the Chicago school style. It has occupied the same site since 1933, and it retains the historic soda fountain that was installed in the same year. The soda fountain is designed in the classical bar shape with permanently mounted stools lining the perimeter. And the applicant also keeps a display of historical pharmacy-related items along the shelves within the store. And the co-owner is the second-generation pharmacist running the pharmacy. And it is a cultural touchstone for the citizens of Grants Pass People go in there to the soda fountain. It has this great old-time feel in there. In addition to serving the community as a functioning pharmacy, and according to the owner, it's the only remaining locally owned pharmacy in the city. All of the others are chain stores. So for those of you unfamiliar with it, I brought in a photo of the interior of the soda fountain with the bar stools and also the exterior. Just as the previous one, we look at the 4 criteria, we review them, staff report is presented to the HBSC, and they make their determination. And of course, they did find that the criteria for designation as a local landmark are met, and they recommend approval. And the call to action on this one is the same as the previous one, same date. All the applications were processed through at the same time. So approve as submitted with conditions or with modified conditions, deny or postpone. Thank you.
Any questions for Donna? Rob?
Donna, can you please briefly explain, you mentioned that it's a contributing building. Can you explain that term to the council? You said it was a contributing.
Explain what a contributing building
Yeah,
is
yeah.
in the survey.
Right.
It contributes to the, you would probably know the definition better than I. You were on the commission for quite a few years. But it contributes to the overall historic district rather than one that could have been built in 1980 but was in the district. It would be non-contributing to the historic character of the district. Does that cover it, Rob?
Yeah, that's on one end of it. And on the other end of it, you've got certain buildings that would be landmark buildings, you know, Harbeck Building or some of these others that have really very impressive historic character. Contributing buildings have a little bit lower threshold for some of the other things that we're talking about within CLG, if I'm not mistaken, right? Contributing building.
Was there a question in there? I'm sorry, I'm
Well,
having a
there's
hard time with the
there's a
math.
tier, there's a tiered approach, we'll say, to the importance of buildings in the historic district, right?
Well, we use the same criteria for all of them. So we don't say one's less or more, but we look at the overall package. And the fact that the building is, you know, it's not an 1800s building, but you combine that with the fact that it's been the same business since 1933. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Donna. At this time, we'll open it up to the public. Is there any, is the applicant here today? Or anyone else here to speak in favor of this? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this? Staff have any further comments? In that case, the matter is now before the council for your consideration. Do we have any? Valerie?
Well, I sure like going down to the pharmacy and taking my grandchildren there, and I do appreciate it as a national landmark. So I'm going to move to adopt the ordinance designating Grants Pass Pharmacy as an historical local landmark and have it read by title only, first reading.
Thank you. Is there a second? Vanessa with the second. Discussion? No? Okay, let's call for a vote. De La Grange?
Yes.
Ogier?
Yes.
Riker?
Yes.
Kaiser?
Yes.
Lovelace?
Yes.
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Pell?
Yes.
Thank you. All right.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass designated Grants Pass Pharmacy, 414 Southwest 6th Street as an historical local landmark.
Thank you. Do we have Rick?
I'd like to move to adopt the ordinance designating the Grants Pass Pharmacy as a historical local landmark and have it read by title only, second reading.
Thank you. Valerie with the second. Discussion? Vote. De La Grange?
Yes.
Ogier?
Yes.
Riker?
Yes.
Kaiser?
Yes.
Lovelace?
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Pell.
Yes.
Thank you. Julie?
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass designated Grants Pass Pharmacy, 414 Southwest 6th Street, as an historical local landmark.
Thank you. All right, our next public hearing is to consider an ordinance that would designate the Redwood Empire sign as a historical local landmark, and we have Donna again with the presentation.
I'll turn on the mic. Thank you. It's interesting that this is being recommended as a local landmark designation when it's also included on our template for our presentations. It's definitely part of Grants Pass. So the subject is to designate the Redwood Empire sign as a local landmark for section 13.400. This inclusion will serve to meet the intent of the historic preservation ordinance for cultural impacts it offers. Relationship to council goals, encourage economic opportunities, and provide cooperative shared leadership involving council staff and the community. I did receive a call this afternoon from a representative of the property owner of this parcel that was sent out on the notices. All of the narrative in the notices said it was adjacent to this address, not part of the address. So I did want to clarify for everyone here and for the record that the sign is not located on the parcel at 986 Southwest 6th Street. It's actually in the right-of-way on the state highway, and that documents at the city will be linked through the historic marker icon in our GIS and will not be linked to the tax lot. So I wanted to assure the public that this landmark is in the right-of-way on the state highway and not on anyone's private parcel. And the HBSC voted to recommend approval at their December 10th meeting. And just, if you're curious, I added this little mark here on the map to show that that's where it is in the right-of-way. Oops. So the subject sign has been in the same location since 1941. And it was erected with the support of the Redwood Empire Association, which was a highway commission, now defunct. The trend in the U.S. in the late 1930s and 40s was to promote road trips to explore the country, and these highway commissions around the country were developed to help the local tourism, to bring people through, say, hey, look what we've got, look where you can go from here. So prior to the interstate highway system, Highway 99 was the only direct route from Oregon to California and the Redwoods. From this part of Oregon, you had to take Highway 99. Over the years, few alterations have been made to the sign. There was some directional signage that said to San Francisco, and that was removed probably around the time Interstate 5 opened. There are a couple other little things that came and went, some lattice. They believe that the background of the sign may have been brown at one time, but it was painted green around the 1960s, the current green that it is now. So in 2016, there was talk around town that some of you are probably very familiar with, about whether it should be replaced or refurbished. And as part of the HBSC effort to refurbish and restore the sign rather than replace it, and that is what happened. And the neon was restored, and the green background and the white lettering. So I think everyone in this room has seen this sign, unless you never cross the river. Or you drive in text and don't look at what's going on around you, I'm not sure. And as I said, the Courier covered it quite extensively, and it's definitely a local landmark. Now, hopefully tonight, it'll just make it official. Again, the 4 criteria were looked at, as we've covered in the previous 2. And the HBSC found that all the criteria for designation as a local landmark are met, and they recommend approval. And your call to action is the same as the previous 2. March 19th, as submitted with conditions stated in the staff report or other conditions, denial or postponement.
Thank you, Donna. Are there any questions? No? Okay, at this time, I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? Please come forward and tell us your name.
Hello, my name is John Bowen. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Johnson, the owner of the property adjacent to it, commonly known as the Riverside Inn. I appreciate Donna addressing the concern that we brought up, and the reason for the concern is all the designation kind of shows the whole parcel as the location for the sign. Knowing how the system works, our concern was that, let's say he pulls a painting permit on the building, the GIS would register, historic building, you got to go before, and then interpretation. Or what if we want to fix the sign that's our sign that's adjacent to this sign? What I'd like to clarify is 2 things. Here's some old documents, and there were some recent ones. I know when I was involved in the project with the Redwood sign years ago, back in 16, and the issue of whose property was it on and whatnot, and there was some internal documents that illustrated that. I'm going to give you this as part of the record. And this shows that this would have been way back when, because you can see the hotel that's now where Evergreen Park is, but it showed how the city vacated property lines and adjusted the, the road easement? Right-of-way, thank you. And so the sign is clearly in the right-of-way easement, and what we'd like to make sure is that this adoption is the sign, but it's not the surrounding area of the sign, that it should not be affected by his ability to perform on his property. So we just want to make sure that the language protects that right of his. All right?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else here to speak on this issue? All right, do we have further comments from staff?
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate that the sign is clearly identified in the narrative, that it's on the state highway, in the right-of-way. It will not be associated with that tax parcel in any city files or folders. Okay.
Thank you. DJ has a question.
So Donna, so then I'm just going to elaborate on this. Is it pretty standard procedure that the parcel is highlighted in its entirety, even though it's in reference to the right-of-way?
Yes, that was the only way we could figure out how to locate it on the map, because then the narrative clearly states, and the map clearly states, adjacent to. The map actually says adjacent to this address, and when we were putting it out there, the way the GIS system works is that we can't highlight the highway. And so, but it's a really good point that John makes, and so I spoke to our GIS coordinator this afternoon about how we could associate this landmark designation with that point on the map. And we actually do have icons that designate where local landmarks are, And so we're going to associate the file with the point, just the point. And so it won't be in a tax lot folder, it will be on the point on the map, if that makes sense for anyone familiar with GIS and how that works. Yes,
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? All right, at this time, the matter is now before the council for your consideration, and do we have discussion? Valerie?
Well, I don't know, I don't see anybody's hands jumping up. I think we all recognize that that sign is something that is historic after all that we've been through. And thank goodness we did indeed refurbish it. So I'm going to move or make a motion to adopt the ordinance designated the Redwood Empire sign located in the Oregon State Highway right-of-way as a historical local landmark and have it read by title only, first reading.
Thank you. Is there a second? Joel with the second. All right, is there discussion? Rob?
Yeah, I just like to comment that the fact that this is actually before the council tonight is really testament to the recognition and expertise of the HBSC. It occurred at a time when I was not on the HBSC, so I'm not tooting my own horn here, but there were many in town, as we know, that really didn't see what this was and didn't understand what this was. But the people on the HBSC were very clear and they understood it, and because they pushed real hard, this got refurbished and it has neon, and hopefully it'll be here for generations. After the next few years, no one will understand that it was the HBSC that is responsible for refurbishing it and seeing the value, but at least those in the room tonight know that, and for the next few years we'll know that, and in the future people will just enjoy it for what it is, a beautiful sign and a beautiful piece of Grants Pass history.
Thank you. Further comment? All right, in that case, let's call for the vote. DeLaGrange?
Yes.
Ogier?
Yes.
Riker?
Yes.
Fazer?
Yes.
Lovelace?
Yes.
King?
Yes,
Pell?
Yes.
Thank you. First,
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass designating Redwood Empire sign, Highway 99 at Caveman Bridge as an historical local landmark.
thank you. Vanessa?
I move to adopt the ordinance designating the Redwood Empire sign as a historical local landmark and have it read by title only, second reading.
Thank you. Rick with the second. Discussion? All right, vote. DeLaGrange?
Yes.
Ogier?
Yes.
Riker?
Yes.
Fazer?
Yes.
Lovelace?
Yes.
King?
yes,
Pell?
Yes.
Thank you.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass designating Redwood Empire sign, Highway 99 at Caveman Bridge as an historical local landmark.
Thank you. The ordinance passes unanimously, and that concludes the public hearing section of our meeting this evening. So we'll move on to council action, and the first item before us is an proposed ordinance amending the municipal code, chapter 4.05, relating to the lodging tax.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Presented before you is an ordinance amending Municipal Code Chapter 4.05 for the purpose of increasing the lodging tax rate. This ordinance would amend the code in two sections. 0.020, lodging tax imposed, increasing that from 9 to 12% total. And 0.240, which is the disposition and use of lodging tax funds, which is where we establish the distribution percentages of the net lodging tax proceeds of the total 12% tax. The relationship to your council goals is to encourage economic opportunities and also to enhance public safety, as both tourism promotion and public safety would be having increased revenues from lodging taxes. Considering the amount of additional revenue that can be attained from that additional 3% and seeing that grow over the next several years, that 3% in FY22 could bring as much as $564,500. I will say that that number is an estimate, and with the pandemic going on right now and the longevity of its effects may decrease that number, I would say, to be realistic, but it definitely does have that potential based on our old, our lodging tax activity pre-COVID. So for the sake of tonight's discussion, tourism includes both tourism promotion and tourism-related facilities. To discuss the requirements that the state has for implementing a new tax, ORS 320.350 Section 3 says that we may not, or excuse me, a municipality may not decrease the percentage of total local transient lodging tax revenues expended to fund tourism, which includes both of those categories. And then number 6 says that at least 70% of the new tax must be allocated toward tourism. Again, both of those options. The calculation used to estimate the potential revenues for the different programs is as you see before you. This option has been presented to council in the past. What this does is it simply adds 3% total lodging tax and then meets the ORS requirement of having 70% of that new tax going toward tourism promotion. And the other 30% of that new 3% tax is going to public safety. Just to put those numbers a little bit larger and easier to see, that has a total percentage being allocated toward the tourism division of 40%, which if there are any additional funds left over in the tourism division, those funds are restricted for tourism purposes. Again, the two categories. So if it has any additional funds, council could make the decision to transfer those funds to the capital project fund for tourism-related facilities. The Land and Buildings Capital Fund for tourism-related facilities would receive 11.67% of the total lodging tax, 22.08% to public safety, 14.58% to parks, and 5.83% to both economic development and downtown development. Considering the timing of the lodging tax, there is about a month and a half delay in the collection of lodging tax revenues. So lodging tax activity in January through March becomes April revenue, and April through June activity becomes July revenue. So that means that the ordinance would need to be adopted by March 1st in order to take effect on April 1st in order for FY22 to receive a full year of this new lodging tax. This particular ordinance does not have any cost implication. For the call to action, it is recommended that council adopt the ordinance amendment as presented. Your call to action date is at council's discretion. But some options could be to have the first and second reading tonight, or potentially a first reading tonight with a second reading at a special meeting on Monday, March 1st, or that could be at a future date to be determined. Your alternatives are to enact the amendment as proposed, amend the ordinance further, or to not enact the ordinance. And that concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Are there any questions? Brian?
Thank you, Adam. Could you go back to the slide where the percentage breakdown was? One forward. Yes, thank you. So my question is with regards to the first two percentages. You have the first line that says additional funds may be allocated to capital projects, and then on the second percentage is tourism-related facilities. So is that all just kind of one thing? Because it sounds like the top line could be used for capital projects, which would be tourism-related facilities. So is there really any difference between what those two things mean?
It's kind of a accounting shortcut to get the funds directly to where council had intended them to be used in the capital fund. As far as the requirements on using the funds for tourism-related activities, whether it goes to the tourism division directly or goes to tourism, and then to land and buildings capital, as long as those funds are spent on tourism promotion or tourism-related facilities, they're meeting the requirements of the ORS. I had made a presentation with an option of some simplification and maximizing flexibility. We are already kind of doing that with the ordinance as is. So by putting the entire 70% of this new lodging tax into the tourism division, you have that maximum flexibility. It's in the tourism division. If council would like to spend that on tourism promotion, any leftover funds can of course be used on capital projects. So that's just some flexibility that we've already got, and this builds that in as well.
Thank you.
Valerie?
I've got numbers like dancing around in my head, because the numbers that I guess I don't understand here. I understand that the full 70%, that you haven't changed anything in terms of the 70% and the 2%, which is what we talked about earlier. You talked about reducing that, but you're keeping that the same. So the tourism-related facilities, that the 2% stays the same, the 30%. So basically, you haven't really changed anything, right? And basically, what you did with the 3% is that you just added the 30% directly to public safety, and then the 70. So it's a 70-30 split, which is required. So basically, you've just kept it dry, which is great. But the next slide confuses me a little bit.
So before I jump to that next slide, what's on that next slide is
Yes.
over in the bottom right where it says percent of total.
Oh, that's the percent of total. Okay.
Yeah, the next
Okay.
slide is just that blown up.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was having a hard time. So that's of all of it. So across the board with each one of the 7% was first of all, the 2% was added on next, and then the 3% that we're adding on now, that is the percentage of the total of all those together, is what you're saying, correct?
Of the entire 12%, that's correct.
Okay. And so in that particular case, you're looking at a change with the increasing of the 30% or the 70% or the 3%, I guess it is, a change of 395,150, correct? And the number that will go to public safety is the 169,350. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions for Adam? No? Okay. Is there any members of the public here to speak on this? Please come forward and tell us your name.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Terry Hopkins. I work for the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association, and I'm a member of both the Tourism Advisory Committee and the Tourism Starter Board here in Grants Pass. I've grown up here. Food, beverage, hospitality, tourism has been my whole entire life in Grants Pass. I came tonight to, you've heard from me in the past about whether that should be a 2% or 3% increase. I came here tonight to comment on items in your packet that you received that were not presented in the presentation tonight. While I would be in support if you did enact the 3% to go with the proposal as presented tonight, I do have concerns still in some of the amendments in the packet that you have in front of you as it relates to the existing grandfathered clause of tourism, whether you call it the 7+2 or the 9%. But in your packet, one of the line items there reduces under the 2% column the tourism-related facilities from the existing 70% to a proposed 45%. I go back to the letter that I wrote you for your last council workshop and some of the interpretations of that. There's still some confusion around the word total, but if you did go back to that League of Oregon Cities Legal Guide to Collecting Transient Lodging Tax, that word total does show up on page 3. In page 3, where it's mentioned, is a section titled Statewide Regulations, and it's really kind of an overview of transient lodging tax. As you get further into that legal guide, it's very clearly defined on a topic that's specific to what you're addressing tonight. There is a category called increasing grandfathered tax, and it very specifically states an example. It says, if the local government had a 5% grandfathered tax with 20% going to tourism promotion and 80% going to the general fund, it could continue to apply the 20/80 split. In your case tonight, on that one, it would be the 70 at tourism-related facilities distribution. If, however, the local government increased the tax to 8%, the 20/80 distribution would apply to revenue generated from the grandfathered 5%, and the 70/30 distribution would only apply to the new tax. So everything you had in your red column tonight, the 70/30 split is very appropriate. I do have concern with reducing the existing grandfathered clause and feel that both in the House bill and in the League of Oregon Cities legal guide, it's very clearly pointed out. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on this?
It was already on. Hi, good evening. My name is Brad Niva. Thank you, Council and Mayor, for the opportunity to speak tonight. My role is I'm the Executive Director of Travel Southern Oregon. We're the regional tourism office that covers the 5 counties of Southern Oregon. I work in 6 different DMO models, from Roseburg to Grants Pass to Ashland to Medford. Every one of our cities is going through a reevaluation of their tourism spending. One of the things that you folks are looking at is you are taking a 9 and considering to bump it to 12. You will now be the 3rd highest transient lodging tax in the state of Oregon. Now, that's okay as long as you continue to fund tourism promotion. Our industry is in support of this as long as the new tourism office that we're establishing has the needed funds to actually get up to a level to compete within their state tourism model. So we ask in this funding that as you proceed down the road, and we're going to have a contract with you folks going out to the new board eventually, that there will be adequate funding and that it doesn't get pulled off into other sections. So we really do need the funding to make things happen. Now, we could end up with a really neat situation here where you have a good funding contract and you have enough money left over to set up a grant program. The city of Roseburg uses this policy where they have a contract for tourism and then they have a grant program that can be tapped into. Your events could actually take out a grant or ask for a grant for promotion of their events. That would be a good way to do the marketing for those. Dollar Mountain, you have some facilities that are going to need to be built. You can actually take a grant out for tourism funds for signage and parking lot and bathrooms. Those are all tourism related facilities. So just want you guys to think about that process. We have a great opportunity to fund a really good tourism office, and we can also get some other things accomplished while we're doing this. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public here to speak on this issue? All right, I'll open it up for council discussion. Rick has a question.
I have some additional staff questions. Adam, when we look at the chart with the percentages, in the 7% column where we have public safety 25, parks 25, economic development 10, and downtown development 10, since that 70% is already out there separately, do we still have the option of reallocating the percentages within those 4 items?
Under this category, all of these fall under city operations or city services. Reallocating those would not go against any of the ORS requirements, which just require no changes or reductions to the tourism promotion or tourism-related facilities distribution.
So just for an idea, not that we decide tonight, but we could reallocate that 7%, the 70% of the 7% to public safety, and then in the new 3%, we could then allocate that amount to the other departments. And also, like downtown development, we have urban renewal and so forth. We might be able to use that as a resource to replace some of this that would, if those other areas were shorted. And I'm not saying we want to discuss that tonight, but
I believe if I understand you correctly, we could do that.
Okay.
Yeah, to answer your question, within the 30% of the new addition you're talking about, you have flexibility to move within those lower categories
Okay,
at a later date.
all right, thank you.
Rob?
So is any of the funds, or any of the funds that go to public safety are out of this pool, are they in any way, shape, or form directed towards tourism activities? Like, in other words, they have to be used for overtime for special events or anything like that? Or is it completely at the discretion of basically the public safety department? Is there any tourism direction attached to these funds?
There's no direct
Thank you.
ties to tourism-related activity. The assumption is that public safety is being provided for tourists as well. But that's one of those discretionary uses of those funds under the city operations category.
Valerie?
Yeah, I'm just going to say I have been very involved with this process, being on the starter board, and I am very happy to see us move to this direction, to stick with what the rules said about tourism, and that the 70-30 split, and we kept the original split, because I do know that right now we're kind of in a little bit of a funk with our lodging tax, as is everybody, but I do think Grants Pass has a lot to offer, and I really feel strongly that it is a economic driver in our community, and we need to support it strongly. So I am very happy to see, at first I hesitated because I really wanted to stick with the 2% increase, because that was what the tourism said, as well as the DMO, whatever. But since the council wanted the 3%, I'm just happy to see that we arrived at this position that we are indeed going to fully fund our tourism. So thank you.
Do we have further questions for Adam? No? Okay, thank you, Adam. You have council comment? Okay, DJ?
Yeah, I
then
have a
Brian.
comment. Based on my the input that I've received from Tourism Advisory and the Board of Commissioners, it's my opinion that we should maintain that 2%, because going to 3% will, in effect, max us out in our ability to impose maybe another % in the future if needs would arise. And for that reason, I'll be voting no.
Brian?
I move to adopt the ordinance implementing an additional 3% lodging tax and establishing the distribution of net proceeds, and have it read by title only, first reading.
Second? Vanessa, thank you. Is there a discussion, Brian? Vanessa? No? Anyone else? All right, we'll vote on the motion to adopt a 3% lodging tax. Brian?
Yes.
OJ?
Yes.
Riker?
No,
Phaser?
No.
Valerie?
Yes.
King?
Yes?
Pell?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-2. And we will not be doing a second reading at this time. All right, next up on our agenda. Oh yeah, Julie, do you need to read the first reading? I'm sorry.
City of Grants Pass revising Chapter 4.05 of the Municipal Code relating to lodging tax.
Thank you. All right, on the next item on our agenda, we have discussion regarding possibly extending the camping hours of the unhoused. And I'll open it up to questions with our city attorney.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. I don't have a typical presentation, but I did put up the injunction as a visual aid. Back on January 6th, the council directed staff to enforce a new policy with regard to the injunction, and that is non-enforcement beginning at actually 5 p.m. rather than 7 p.m. as specified in the injunction, and that persists, I think, until the beginning of April. So a word of caution, please do not discuss what either I or Mr. Heisel stated in executive session, in prior executive sessions. It's kind of technicality, but if you do that, it constitutes a waiver of privilege, and we just don't want to go there. I'm happy to respond to council and give advice at this meeting, but please do not reference something that either here I said at that meeting. So from here, I'll just turn it over to council. I'd be happy to take questions, but I'll sit over there.
Okay, I think we will start this with
Thank you.
any questions for you, if you want to stay for just a moment.
Happy to stay.
Does anyone have any questions for Mark at this time? Valerie?
Yes, I just want to clarify, because we did make a change, didn't we, to the time in the evening? Is that notified on there, or, because didn't we say that they?
Well, that's not listed on here. So
Right.
this is just the injunction. So you
Right.
did make a change.
Right.
So fourth line down under C says you're not going to enforce these from 7 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. So I believe council changed that to 5 p.m.
Yes, okay, that was my clarification, as I just didn't know whether we did at both ends or just the 5 PM. So that they could set up camp earlier in the daylight was the
Correct.
purpose of that. Okay, thank you.
Rob?
So when the council made a change to be more flexible, 2 hours, setting up 2 hours earlier, that in no way, shape, or form violated the injunction because it was, we'll say, more permissive than what the
Correct.
injunction mandated.
Yep,
That's
that's
correct?
correct.
So if we were to make a similar change as far as extending hours that they were allowed or allow their tents up or something like that, that would also be something that would be legally permissible and not get us in any hot water.
Well, it would not violate the injunction.
Violate the injunction. Thank you.
Other questions for Mark? Okay, thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you.
All right, I'll open it up to the public for comments on the topic of extending the hours for the unhoused to be camping or resting in the parks. Is there anyone here to speak on this issue? Please come forward and tell us your name.
Good evening, Council. My name is Clint Scherf, and I'd like to start with basically reading some stuff just to remind you as well as educate the public. This comes directly from the council handbook that you guys are supposed to abide by. And it says that the city council is a city legislative policy-making body. The city does establish a vision for the city, sets goals, approves the city's work plan, and approves the budget. That comes from section 3, basically describing what you guys do. Now, if you go into section 5, which is basically council roles and responsibilities, it specifically says that your council responsibility is that, sorry, let me reiterate that. Stating specifically from the text, the council has the responsibility to represent the citizens of the city. The council has a responsibility to provide a vision, set goals, make plans, and allow the city to prosper. Finally, they have a responsibility to make the decisions in the best interest of the city versus what is popular. Now, I just wanted to say that out loud because I don't know if your public really knows what your responsibilities are, and I want you to remind you what your responsibilities are. Your responsibilities are to govern for the greater good of the city. You have a lawsuit and an injunction in place that's been agreed upon by the people that sued you and your representative lawyers. You've already deviated from that, so now you've opened the door. If you deviate any further from that, I think that you are traveling down the wrong road. And I'm standing here speaking to you as a concerned citizen, asking you to represent me as a citizen of the city and leave this injunction in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on this issue? No.
There you go?
Yes.
There we go.
Please tell us your name.
My name is Amanda Artoff. I'd like to address the issue of extending the camping hours. Currently, the unhoused are allowed to sleep in the city park from 5 to 7:30. Many of them do not abide by these current guidelines. Instead, they take up residency, creating unsafe and unsanitary parks for families to take their children. Keep in mind the reason these parks were created: 1, to make our downtown a better place, and 2, to have a safe and welcoming place for the Grants Pass citizens and the tourists to enjoy. Have you actually walked through the parks before it has been cleaned up? Have you individually offered to help those living in the park? Placed them in your vehicle, drove them to ODHS or UCAN? Almost daily, trucks of trash and needles are currently being removed from the parks. Not to mention the city workers who are subjected to possibly being struck with a used needle and having to clean human feces from their shoes. Also, those sleeping in the park are typically listed as transients. If they happen to be a sex offender, the ability to keep track of their whereabouts is difficult. Does that seem safe when it comes to your children or your grandchildren? It is important to address that the unhoused living in the city parks have not been displaced by the fires. Extending the sleeping hours, let alone allowing them to sleep in the parks at all, is like putting a Band-Aid on poison oak. The illness is not being unhoused. It is addiction and mental illness. Grants Pass offers many resources to help individuals in these situations and have been offered every possible resource, including transportation, to get assistance with their addiction or mental health issues from the Grants Pass Police Department. I can positively say that 2 of the primary officers have regular contact with them. They're members of mental health court and has specialized training in handling people with mental crisis. They also are members of drug court and have received specialized training in helping people with addiction issues. The unhoused have no interest in receiving help with their issues. It appears they would rather live a life free of responsibilities. But again, wouldn't we all? If individuals choose not to better their lives with assistance, the city should definitely not expect its citizens to suffer the consequences. These consequences include risk of harm, risk of infection, property values decrease, taxes increase, crime increased, especially when your solution to budget fails is to lay off officers. You also have the overall appearance of our city becoming unappealing to tourists, which drives our local economy. Lastly, I personally believe if you are looking out for the citizens of this city, all citizens and business owners should be notified of your intent to allow unhoused to reside for any extended time within the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on this issue?
Good evening, everyone. I am Tim Artoff. I'm a police officer with the City of Grants Pass, and I'm currently assigned to the community response team. It is one of my main duties to patrol the parks and to go down there and to try to help people out, come up with solutions. And I'm going to tell you, that's exactly what I do every day. You might recognize me from popular Facebook posts that shows me stealing tents or subjecting our transient population to otherwise cruel and unusual punishment if you listen to the Facebook stats or commentators. But I'm here to tell you that I am down there every day trying to offer solutions to people, trying to come up ways to get them off the streets and out of the park, because that is not a solution. The park is not a solution. At one point, there was talk of putting porta potties down there. Now, I'm down there, my shift starts at 7 a.m. and ends at 5 p.m. most days. So while I'm down there, the bathrooms are open. And just today, for example, as I was going to do my park check, there was a gentleman sleeping in a sleeping bag. And as I was getting closer, he jumped up and kind of made a beeline for the pillars in between the two bridges. Now, I'm down there every day, so I knew exactly what he was going to do, but I walked over there anyways. And he was there urinating, even though the bathrooms were open probably 500 feet away. So it is not an issue about not having a place to go to the restroom. It's just a utter lack of respect for our city, the city that all of us live in. And by extending these hours like you guys are talking about, you guys are putting the needs of a few far, far above the wants and desires of most of the people. So I'm here to ask you, as a police officer, do not deviate any further from this. It's working. We are doing a good job of keeping the park mostly cleaned up. And I personally believe no changes are needed from this.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a question for you, please.
Yeah, first I'd like to say thank you for handling the job that is pretty thankless, I guess, as far as not necessarily policing in general, but that specific job is an everyday ordeal in a certain level, because you probably don't get too much of a sense of satisfaction because it happens again the next day. But in any event, I appreciate that you being down there.
Thank you.
So when you, or when the homeless people disperse, they leave their tents or they're forced out of their tents, or depending on what day it is and what the weather is and all that, where do they go?
I don't know where they go. I've had people ask me, where should I go? Officer Artoff, where should I go? And I say, well, have you been up to UCAN to see what services they offer there? Have you been up to DHS to see what services they have there? Have you been wherever you can go to get services? Have you been up to Dorcas to take a shower and to get some food? Where do you go during the day? Nobody tells me where to go during the day. So I give them different options on what they can do during the day and where they can go. I give them options on how to downsize their personal belongings to things that are vital, not hundreds of bike parts that are never going to be used, not garbage that they've pulled out of dumpsters. So that's what I tell them. You're welcome.
Valerie? We know that a big part of the problem is mental health issues, and what services are available in our community for mental health services? Where do you send them, or what is available in our community?
So primarily there's CRC, which is Crisis Resolution Center. There is, which is routed through our hospital, TRMC, Three Rivers Medical Center. So the first step would be to go to the hospital to get some kind of a mental evaluation. And I am by no means the expert, but you know, if somebody is telling me they're having mental health issues, I know enough to at least get them to the hospital, to get them to the professionals that can find different resources. My partner, Jason McGinnis, is really more versed in the mental health side of things, whereas I've kind of taken up the drug addiction side of things. So typically when we're dealing with mental health people with mental health issues, Officer McGinnis takes the lead on those.
Do you feel that those are the big issues that you see down there, or what do you see as the biggest issue creating the homeless situation?
Without a doubt, it is drug addiction and mental health issues.
Okay. Thank you. And once again, thank you for what you do. It is a thankless job, and I do appreciate. And I thank you for coming tonight.
You're welcome.
Counselor Pell? Oh, sorry, it was King.
Thank you for your service. I appreciate it. What kind of training, if any, have you had to deal effectively with mental health and substance abuse issues, and to be a positive influence in our community?
I'm sorry, so what was the question? I'm sorry.
What kind of training have you received to deal with mental health and substance abuse issues, and to continue to be a positive influence in our community?
Yeah, we attend regular trainings on whether it's a week-long class on how to handle people in crisis, how to de-escalation training, even if it's training from community partners that'll come in and let us know about the services they offer, the women's crisis support. I mean, we're just constantly getting training on how to help people. We're not down there trying to make things worse, and we tell people that, hey, we're not trying to make things worse. We've given hundreds of warnings for every tent we take out of the park or forced to. It is absolutely a last resort. We're telling them, hey, come on, you know, we got these rules, you got to abide by the rules. So my message to them and to all of you is I don't believe that because you're unhoused, you should not have to abide by any rules. There's rules all of us have to follow. And that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you.
Sarah, I have a question.
Yeah, oh, Brian has a question.
I was just wondering if you post notice for somebody to vacate in 24 hours and they choose not to, what happens at that point? How do you handle that situation?
I'm sorry, I've frankly been uncomfortable with the question and answer thing going on. And I'm not picking on you, the pressure was mounting on me. Where in litigation, some of these questions could be used against us. I appreciate Officer Artoff coming and sharing his personal experience. I think that that's valuable to put a real life touch on it, rather than we know we have the officers out there doing this and we have the homeless community and their side, but I am becoming very uncomfortable with this. And so I would be most thankful if we thanked Officer Artoff for his comments and we moved on.
Thank you, Officer
Thank
Artoff,
you,
for your
Arta.
comments.
All right, we'll open it up for council. Well, is there anybody else from the audience here to discuss this? Okay, we'll open it up for council discussion. And, well, I'm going to start with Rob because he is the one who asked us to discuss this tonight, so.
Well, I think that I'm confident I speak for everyone in the room when I say that none of us like the current situation of our homeless nationwide or specifically in Grants Pass. We all wish that there was a magic wand and we could make these people whole, and we wish that they would be happier and abide by more rules, et cetera, et cetera. There's no doubt that we all feel that way. So then the question is, how do we handle the situation? I mean, I think historically, 10 or 20 years ago, whether it was police giving somebody a Greyhound ticket and sending them down the freeway, or driving them to the I-5, or just making them, as the testimony in court was just from a few years ago, making them feel less comfortable in Grants Pass. These were all things that were basically tried as homelessness escalated here and also across the country. We'll call that Plan A, right? Clearly, Plan A didn't work, okay, because our homeless situation keeps getting worse here and everywhere else. So now the question is, what's Plan B? And nobody really has a great answer. So we're all, cities all over the place are trying different things to different degrees. One thing that I would say about the situation in the parks is clearly, and I've said it before, I said it on January 6th, in no way, shape, or form do I feel that homeless having free reign in our parks to camp wherever they want, whenever they want, is not a long-term solution that I would ever support. With that said, I also feel that I've noticed one of the first days, well, I've noticed, it seems as though, I have no degrees, I have no PhD in this, it would seem to me that if homeless people are in the park or any one area, they're easier to help, they're easier to locate, they're easier to feed, and they're easier to monitor. But once they disperse and go throughout the town during the day, it becomes that much harder. It may not be in one spot, and it may not be one set of neighbors that's aggravated, but now the problem hasn't gone away just because they've left the park. I mean, that's why I asked Officer Ardoff, where do they go? Well, I think we all know that they could be anywhere. And when I say they, I'm not using the pejorative, I'm just saying that the homeless who are in the park, when they are forced to disperse, it's not like it's gotten better. It's gotten better in one small area. So I actually am of the opinion for temporarily, until we can get possibly an urban campground, and I would urge any leader in this room who has not been to the urban campground over in Medford and seen what can be done with very few resources, really needs to go, because it's very, very impressive. It's safer for the homeless, it's safer for the people who, we'll call them the regular citizens. It's safer for everyone. So I would highly recommend, but in any event, at this point, I actually believe that we should extend the hours that they're allowed in their tents in the park. They're more likely to stay in the park, less likely to be a problem wandering the neighborhoods, easier to help and easier to monitor by keeping them in one place. And I do apologize to the people who are the other side of the fence, the mobile home park that's near the place where the homeless set up. I know it can't be pleasant necessarily looking at what you thought was a park view from your mobile home. Now you think it's got tents and trash and so forth. And, but I think that keeping the homeless in one area makes it easier to monitor and easier to help. Thank you.
Joel?
So I just want to do a couple things before I get started, and that's just make sure that you know that I heard what you said, so that if there's, they're allowed to camp in the park longer, then they're not somewhere else, and they're easier to monitor and watch. I've thought about this quite a bit, and I think all of America is struggling with the question, and all the cities are struggling with the question. So I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, but I like critical thinking as well, and so I'll try to communicate that in an effective manner for you. And if it goes on too long, I'll just stop. One of the things I dealt with as a federal official is social justice. This part of our population in the city probably is much more likely to be raped or sexually abused, preyed upon for prostitution, drug addiction. I know when I was a teenager growing up, where I was the only white guy, the pusher killed several of my friends. That was during the Black Power movement, and they happened to be black, were killed by black people, and nobody came to their funeral. It was an emotional time. Beliefs drive behavior. So what I look at strategically, when I look at an issue like this, there's a couple things. We got different segments of our community that are stakeholders. We have the police, we have the council, we have the homeless, we have the people that are perhaps adversely affected by that in terms of what they've used the parks for before, or where they live, and the effects on them, and then the criminal element. So one of the things I found to be effective, and so I just want to describe very briefly, is how I went through the thinking process. My beliefs drive my behavior. And so there's two questions that are really good to ask myself. First off, the belief that I always know what to do. I'm sorry to disappoint you. And if you always know what to do, come talk to me. I don't think that belief serves me very well, so I'm going to discard that. The second belief is that the police are the problem. I feel some people feel that way, and I know in other cities they definitely do. So when I strategically think about the issue, what I do is I change that belief 100%, and then what would I do? Okay, just to look at something different so that it changes. So then police wouldn't be the problem. Police would be part of the solution. So how would I act if my belief is that police are part of the solution? Well, let me answer that from my perspective. I would make sure they're adequately trained in how to deal in crisis intervention. I would make sure that they don't overwrite citations and be hostile to them. I would have them act as social workers while they enforce the law and try to get people into treatment so that they don't have to spend an extra hour down at the park freezing to death in a tent. And I would give them discretion so that if for their benefit, I'm talking about this segment of our population that didn't need, it was raining hard. Maybe I could find something different to do that day. And I wouldn't micromanage them and give them hours to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Because I think it would limit their effectiveness in being part of the solution. And then the next thing I would think of, and deals with the element of trust. Okay, and I fall back on my dad. He says I have no choice but to trust people. And I had to think about that a little bit. I was talking with DJ earlier as a contractor. If I don't trust him as my contractor, I get a new contractor. Because trust is really important to what we do. And the relationship between the city council and the police has to be based on that trust. If you don't have that trust, it doesn't make any difference what the city council does if the police aren't trustworthy to do it. On the other hand, if you have trust that is real and you continue to monitor it and you hold each other accountable, ride-alongs, whatever, because we are actually accountable for what happens within the city and the policy. And if something goes wrong, it's my fault. Because we're the ones that set that policy. So what I would like to do is instead of changing the hours and being firm on those hours, that we continue to abide by the statute or by the injunction and continue to promote and support police as being a part of this solution and give them discretion to enforce that injunction as they see fit and not go beyond it. And if for some reason they want to go less than that, and in their professional judgment that's what's required, I think that would be very appropriate. Now, Mark, you got to stop me because I don't know what's legal and what's not. I don't want to micromanage what this man does for us. I want to trust him. I want to tell him my expectations that he's there to serve all the citizens of this community, which I'm sure he supports, and that he is to help people, not hurt them. And I think he would like that as well. And so that's where I'm at. And I feel fairly strongly about it. I don't want to be dogmatic, but I don't want to micromanage and think that, hey, I've done my job because people can sleep in a tent for one more hour, and I'm being direct, and I don't want to be demeaning. I want to be very respectful to that, but I don't think that's appropriate. And I think to think that I've done my job when I go home tonight, after we've done that, I would feel that I've let people down. and I've contributed and haven't helped the social justice part of what we all need to be aware of.
Vanessa?
I can appreciate that this is an emotional issue and topic. To adhere to our attorney's advice, I'll keep this brief. In anticipating the weather for the remaining of February and for the month of March, I'm seeing it dip as low as 33 degrees. So in consideration of that, I would like to propose extending the camping hours from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. until April 1st of 2021, a condition that is temporary in nature.
That was a suggestion, but not a motion at this point?
Not a motion. I would like to throw that out there for us to consider.
Okay. Valerie?
Yeah, this is difficult. I think it's difficult for all of us. But I will also say that I very strongly believe that we need to protect our parks. I've said that all along, that our parks, I want to think that my teenager or my child or whatever can go down there. And so that's really important to me. I'm also going to just take off a little on what Joel said about trust. I do trust Warren, and I do trust our police. I do know that it's a difficult job. One of the things that Warren has pushed, I know, with this training is trust and trying to have trust in the community. And I recognize, that we hear stories, and that's why I thank you for coming tonight, because we do hear stories. And I think all of us are hoping and that trust is important, that when it is raining and when it is, that you're not, the stories that we're hearing of taking and breaking people's tent poles and that sort of thing, I mean, I just want to believe that I can trust that you are doing the very best that you can do under the circumstances to help those people, because we do know that mental health and drug addiction is what really has put most of them in that position. And I think our responsibility at this point is to do everything we can to build that continuum to encourage Foundry Village to develop and encourage shelter and shelters in this area, and look into the urban campground and speak out to the nonprofits that are out there that feel that compassion to go down and help and do what you can do also to help out, because it's a community problem. It is a community problem. But I also do believe very seriously that I have to trust the police at this point in time. And so I'm going to say I'm going to vote not to change anything, but just trust that there are people down there watching, as you know, and there is an appeal process. If anybody down there feels that they're being treated unfairly, that there are steps that they can take to appeal what is happening. So that's my thoughts.
I just want to quickly clarify something that you said about people being in the park, Valerie, that homeless people do have a right to be in the park
Oh, they do
all
have.
throughout the day, so we're only really discussing the sleeping and the camping.
Okay.
So
Thank you
I
for
know
that
that there's
clarification.
been
I'm
kind
just-
of this thought in the general public too, but if somebody wants to use the swing or a picnic table or, sit under a tree or whatever you might do in a park, they can do that. DJ, then Rick?
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Sarah, because you're exactly right. The public can use the park. So keep it brief. I agree with Joel and I agree with Valerie. I'm not in favor of expanding the hours. I think they've been expanded already, which is fine. We feel good about that. But my position is that we have an injunction that was wrought from a successful lawsuit, and we are currently in an appeal process. This is an agreement between the plaintiff and the defendant, and struck and sealed by a judge. And this is way outside of my area of expertise, and I'm going to trust our legal counsel and our public safety department in regards. And so just to keep it clear, my position is against expanding these hours.
Rick?
I also endorse what Valerie, Joel, and DJ have said. I've been to the various camps that they have in Eugene and seen those, and they've operated fine, and there's one in Medford, I think that's being run quite well, and I think we're maybe heading that direction, but that's something to come in the future. Also, last week went to Medford and saw along the Greenway, the number of tents that's there, and their homeless situation over there is out of control. And I would say, I feel at this point, extending the hours just opens the door. So I would not be supportive of extending the hours any further.
All right. We don't have a motion on the table. We don't need to keep discussing this all night. Joel, do you have something?
Well, I just didn't want to lose track for my own benefit to say that, a summit with all the stakeholders can be a very important tool to come to a consensus in a way that hopefully fully addresses the problem. But it has to include all the stakeholders, including that segment of the population themselves. And I don't know if you've ever been through one of those. I have, and they're very powerful. There's consultants that do that. And people like Clint need to come, Brian needs to come. If we had one like that, everybody needs to be there. And it's an interesting thing as we confront the issue together.
Brian?
So we've already extended the hours once, and there were no issues with that. So there wouldn't be any issues with extending them again. The fact of the matter is that we have citizens that are homeless, that are in the park, that are getting rousted early in the morning with wet gear, and they have no place to go, and their gear is essentially being ruined by being forced to be packed up when it's wet and cold and rainy and in the middle of winter. And I would venture a guess that no one sitting on this dais has ever been in that situation. I would guess that neither of the people that commented tonight have ever been in that situation. I've never been in that situation. I'm trying to be empathetic to real people in our town that are in real bad shape, and asking for them to have a couple more hours in the morning so it's not quite so cold or maybe not quite so wet before they have to pack up feels like a very, very small ask. And so when I hear council, the majority of council say they don't have an appetite for that, it's very disappointing. And I hear Valerie saying, protect our parks. Our parks are going to be fine. It's property. There's people. And I think in most other situations, people on this council would say that the people come first. So I would be supportive of moving it to 9 a.m.
Rob? Vanessa?
I'll make a motion to extend the camping park hours from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. at clause temporary in nature through April 1st of 2021.
Second from Brian. Is there discussion? Rob?
There's a comment that Rick made that I need to comment on when he said that there's, just a tremendous amount of homeless on the Greenway in Medford, and that if we change the hours here, it would open the door. I just can't imagine that what we have going on in Riverside Park at our homeless situation is so inviting that it would cause a mass exodus to come to all these facilities. This is not Shangri-La that these people are living in. It's not going to open the door and draw more people in. So I just don't. It's not as if we have some great asset there, But as far as the homeless camp there is not a great asset. The park is, but not the homeless camp. I feel that while I'm sure there's some degree of discretion going on with the police officers that are patrolling the park. I feel that it would be a lot easier for them, it would be a lot easier for the homeless to know, gee, you know, it's raining tomorrow. Is it drizzling? Am I going to be rousted? Is the sun out? Is it drizzling? How is the police officer going to view that situation? It's 39 degrees, it's 41 degrees. We don't know. They don't know. The police may not know when they first wake up in the morning exactly what their job is going to be as far as Riverside Park goes. And I feel that extending the hours and making it clear to all involved, because I actually think that in most cases, that's actually some of the kindest things you can ever do, is to make it clear. What are the guidelines? Okay, we had certain guidelines that were set forth in the in the court order. Some of the council felt that setting up in January, some of the council felt that setting up tents 2 or 3 hours after sundown in the rain was possibly inhumane, and there was nothing to be gained by that. But the point that I'm going to get to is that by forcing them, the homeless, to leave their tents at 7 in the morning, or by forcing them to set up at certain hours, it doesn't gain us anything. It's not like they vanish and leave Grants Pass for the day and come back in the evening. It's not like the rest of the children that want to use the parks. They're still going to see the homeless that are there. So I just don't think it's logical. The argument that I'm hearing for forcing them to leave their tents at a certain hour is not logical if you're actually if you believe that that's going to prevent children from seeing them, or it's going to allow people to then use the parks and not have to think about the homeless. They're still going to be in the park. They're still going to be in our town. The only difference is they're going to be soaking wet and or freezing cold. So I really wish that someone would explain the logic of how it makes it better to make them get out of their tent in the freezing cold or the wet. I haven't heard it. I haven't heard one word that logically supports that.
Nope. No comment. Clint, stop.
Point of order.
All right. Any further comments? I call for the vote. So we have a motion on the table to extend the resting hours from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. through April 1st. Right? Okay. Taylor Grange.
Yes.
Ogier.
Yes.
Riker.
No.
Phaser.
No.
Lovelace.
No.
King.
No.
Pell.
Yes.
Motion failed 4-3. All right. Any further discussion on this? No, I'm sorry, no. It's just, I'm sorry, it's our policy. Okay, next up on the agenda, we have public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to address the city council on items not related to a public hearing or council action item for the council. The intent is to provide information that is pertinent to the city's jurisdiction. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the council as one body, not to individuals. Council may consider items brought up during this time later on our agenda during matters from mayor, council, and staff. This meeting will proceed in an effective and courteous manner. Citizens and council members will be allowed to state their positions in an atmosphere free from slander, threats, or other personal attacks. Signs or placards, outbursts of applause, campaigning for public office, or other disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. If you have a question regarding any government-provided service or a current city policy, please contact the city manager's office in an attempt to resolve the matter. I'm going to remind you that this is an opportunity to talk about items not on the agenda tonight, and we have Chad Thorson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Chad Thorson, and I serve on the Parks Advisory Committee. I'm also on the board for the Rogue Valley Mountain Bike Association, which is a local nonprofit bike advocacy group, and we're a chapter of the International Mountain Bike Association. One of our main goals is to help improve access for mountain bikers of all ages and all skill level. Our VMBA would like to partner with the city to improve B Street jumps to make it more fun and usable for neighborhood kids and for parents with kids. B Street Jumps is located at Loveless Park, which is a 2-acre dirt track, backyard pump track style park. However, it's not seen any improvements that I can really see in history. The only, of the trails there, the only improvements were play structure back in 2003. Dirt Mechanics is a trail design company out of Bend, Oregon, and they volunteered their time to come to Grants Pass and to check out the park, and they designed a site plan for the park and a written description of that. The total price for the project is $25,000. We're asking for the city to allocate $10,000 towards the project so that we can use it for matching funds for the $10,000 four-way community grant, and our VMBA would crowdsource the other $5,000 for the park. Last Thursday at the Parks Advisory Committee, we reviewed the site plan and the funding, and a vote was made to move it on to City Council, and it was a unanimous vote for that. I understand that the council agendas are very full and you have a lot of important things to discuss. I'm asking that you would move this to the agenda for your next meeting to talk about this and hopefully approve it, which would give us time to apply for the four-way community grant, which has a deadline of April 1st. If we miss that grant deadline, then we would have to wait until next year for that grant, and I think it's a perfect grant for that park. And it's really important for our youths to have places to exercise, to ride their bikes, to get fresh air, to hang out with their friends. They're attached to their devices, and even before COVID, there was some struggles with this. Now with COVID, the struggles are even greater, and as we heard at the Parks Advisory Committee, youth suicides are going up. So I think this park is a really good way to improve our parks and to provide a place for kids to ride their bikes. For maintenance, while we're designing the park, we'll train 3 to 4 trail bosses who will then handle all the volunteer trail maintenance of the park, so there'd be no extra work for the city. No trees will be cut. We're only adding dirt. We're not taking dirt away, so there's less rules to worry about there. And these parks are quiet, so I guess my time is up. Thank you.
It is, thank you. DJ has a question for you.
Chad, I have a question for you. Oh, when did you say the deadline for that grant application is?
April 1st.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to meet anyone out there to go over the site plan in the park. I could also email you the plan and the written description of it. You can also contact Wendy Giordano's park superintendent, because she also has that information.
Thank you. Rob has a question.
So do you represent the Parks Committee tonight, or just a citizen? I'm not saying just in that sense, but do you represent the Parks Committee? Because you mentioned that, right?
Oh, I just was introducing who I am, and giving you the information that happened at the Parks Committee. So I'm
just wondering if the
tonight
liaison,
I'm a citizen.
Why is the liaison going to bring us that? Is the chairman of the Parks Committee going to bring us any of this, or?
Well, I believe our Parks liaison is going to bring this up, and
Thank you.
so I just wanted to give you some information to go on, because
And it's also a committee motion. So you're just reinforcing the committee motion.
thanks. Okay,
Thank you.
good evening.
And then we have Clint Scherf.
I humbly apologize for my outburst. I'm sorry. I should know better. I do apologize. I just want to stand up here and thank you, council members, for actually doing your job. And then I want to thank the rest of the council members for actually showing your true colors. The business people are actually watching. I was very disappointed with specifically the actions in regards to a letter to the governor that was discussed in last workshop. I think a lot of the business people in this area are very disgusted with that as well. You may see something in the future, near future, in regards to that. This letter was a ceremonial letter. It had no teeth, no bite, but it actually showed that you, as a governing body, were supporting your local businesses. And, you know, I just had to stand up here and say I'm just disappointed in that action that you guys took on the last workshop, and I apologize to the rest of the community for your actions. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. All right, next up on the agenda, we have a review of emails.
Okay. So you received 2 emails about Dollar Mountain Trails, 2 emails regarding the unhoused and homeless, 1 email about the usage of acronyms during televised and public meetings, 1 email about camping in city parks, 1 email from a budget committee member regarding general fund budget adjustments, and 1 email about COVID and masks.
Thank you. Next up, we have the consent agenda. We'll have our council president take over.
Okay, the consent agenda. Let's see. Item A, resolution creating a position of housing and neighborhood specialist and amending the classification plan. Item B, resolution authorizing the city manager to renew the Oregon Public Works Emergency Response Cooperative Assistant Agreement with ODOT. C, resolution establishing the interest rate to be applied during calendar year 2021 to deferred development agreement monies on deposit. D, resolution authorizing the city manager to renew the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement contract. E, motion acknowledging the receipt of the monthly and quarterly financial reports for quarter ended September 2020. F, motion acknowledging the receipt of the monthly and quarterly financial reports for quarter ended December 2020. G, motion approving the minutes of the city council meeting of February 3, 2021. H, motion acknowledging the minutes of the Historic Building Sites Commission meeting of October 15, 2020. I, motion acknowledging the minutes of the Historic Buildings and Site Commission meeting of November 12, 2020. J, motion acknowledging the minutes of the Collaborative Economic Development Committee meeting of November 24, 2020. K, motion acknowledging the minutes of the Committee on Public Art meeting of December 8, 2020. L, motion acknowledging the minutes of the Tourism Advisory Committee meeting of January 5, 2021. M, motion acknowledging the minutes of the Urban Area Planning Commission meeting of January 13, 2021. And with that, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Valerie? Vanessa, you have a question?
I have a couple points I wanted to make. Is that, yeah, okay. I just wanted to bring to the attention that on the Tourism Advisory Committee minutes, it's still reflecting Mayor Bristol as a member of the committee as of January 5th. So I just wanted to point that out for reasons of accuracy.
Was fixed, but I guess we need to fix that particular set of minutes. But yes, it was brought to my, I brought that up to someone. So we need to fix that particular set of minutes. I will let them know.
Thank you so much. And I also wanted to ask Aaron for item A. Was the Housing Advisory Committee notified of this evening or yesterday that this action would be taken?
I can answer that.
Yeah, anyone would be fine.
So
DJ,
about the
sorry.
housing specialist, yes, I have had a discussion with Doug. It was his intention to come to the workshop, but had an urgent matter coming up, and it is fair to say that they are in support.
Only reason I bring that up is because in the strategic planning, we had talked about as a council inviting them to these types of things, inviting the committees when we discuss.
I did make sure to invite him, and it was his intention to come on Monday.
Thank you.
All right, let's vote on the consent agenda. De La Grange.
Yes.
Ogier.
Yes.
Riker.
Yes.
Phaser.
Yes.
Lovelace.
Yes.
King.
Yes.
Pelt.
Yes.
Terrific. Consent calendar passes. We have matters from mayor, council, and staff. Is there any discussion on public comment tonight? DJ?
So it seems to be that there's support on that B Street, and this kind of likens to, and I guess in a little bit more of an official capacity, the gentleman that came and talked about a partnership with the city for the skate park. And so I just kind of wanted to bring that up and see if we can facilitate that communication, but I see this as a similar, more official, more succinct ask from Parks Advisory and Bike. So I would actually like to see if there is 3 counselors in favor of getting that on an agenda. Couldn't be next meeting because of course we have our interviews, but shortly following thereafter, I think this is something that at the very least deserves a discussion.
I'm seeing nods of yes from Joel and Rob and everybody.
So, you know, I don't know how far of a discussion you want. All we need to do is have direction that, yeah, this is a good idea, and we'll go ahead and move forward with it. I don't know if we need a full workshop on it.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I was just following along with the ask to have a workshop. I just wasn't familiar with the proceedings because they are asking for money, and then.
So they sort of did that background work as an advisory committee, and so a workshop may not necessarily be needed at a council level. So as long as council is in general agreement with that, we can move forward with knowing that we do have some monies associated with park maintenance that would qualify under, that we could sort of make sure that $10,000 may be used as a potential match for another $10,000 grant, with $5,000 coming from the nonprofit that he was talking about, and we can move forward as long as council's okay with that process.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because I didn't know if it was prudent to open up that discussion and actually ask for that kind of decision or direction to be made tonight. So I think I would ask, where's the money coming from? How much money's in that fund? There would be a couple questions that I would have about allocating those monies.
It's all small enough dollars. It's all within the authority of the city manager to do. We do have the resources under the deferred maintenance, which that is a deferred maintenance / improvement for that project. And the grant, we would just help them apply for the grant with our grant specialist, and then we'd have a partnership with that nonprofit. So.
Well, golly, we need to put some money, and we have somebody that's going to do it for us and maintain it while we're at it. It seems kind of like a win from this side. So I'm okay with that. I really am.
Rob?
So I would like to hear the motion that the Parks Committee actually made. So before I can really comment on the validity of any of this. I think we're putting the cart before the horse. I mean, we hear the motion, then maybe it does sound as, I could be as enthusiastic maybe as DJ, but until I've heard the motion, I don't know where.
So I think part of the reason why Chad might have came here tonight is because of the April 1st deadline. He wanted to just make sure we got as much direction as possible. The next time you'd hear the motion would be at the next council meeting, which would be the first meeting in March, which provides less than a month to get that application together. But if we knew that we were going to move forward with that and that we have acceptance, you'll still hear the motion, and we'll be working on the grant application in the meantime.
Okay, so your proposal is to put it on the first meeting in March to have this come back to us on a Wednesday night?
No.
No.
My concept was, I was just referring to when the motion was going to come to you. Because of the timing, the motion will be coming to you at the next council meeting. And my comment was just, I think that Chad came forward because of the time sensitivity of the grant being due April 1st. And if we waited until March 1st, that does, shorten the opportunity for us to have a green light in applying for the grant.
Okay, well, I think if we're going to,
So Joel, do you have the motion tonight? You said you have it with you, no?
No, I don't have it with me. I probably should have brought it. That's negligent on my part. There is a standing agenda item where we could have the motion. My impression would be that it would be put on the agenda shortly, and the motion would be part of that. If you really want to see the motion is very simple, and it does exactly what Chad just talked about.
well,
And it was
that,
unanimous
that's
by-
going to
totally
be
take
my
your word for it.
suggestion. Stop, please. Rather than just, having us all nod. If this is something that we're asking for council approval, we'll put it on a future meeting as soon as possible, and we'll discuss it and talk about it then, rather than giving some sort of nodding approval now. Seems like some counselors are uncomfortable with that.
So I just do have
Brian.
something to say to that, however, though, this is something that the city manager could just do. You know what I mean? This isn't something that actually would really even would need council support. Now, it's nice to have that fielded support in the directions, but I just wanted to point out that as far as the rules and administration goes, he could just do that.
Brian?
So I'm uncomfortable with us essentially authorizing this after a single public comment when the rest of council really doesn't know that much about the project other than the 3 minutes that was heard here. I have no problem with the project. Just to be clear, I'm in support of the project. I have actually met with Chad at the park. I have seen the schematic. I went to the Parks Committee meeting. I don't have any issue with the project per se. I have an issue with the rest of council being okay with it, just from a public comment perspective. And the other thing is usually when we have any sort of noticeable change in a park, whether it's doing modifications at or thinking about modifications at Lawn Ridge or developing Beacon Hill, we ask the neighbors what they think. There are many houses whose backyards directly abut to this park. Some of them don't even have fences. So their backyard and the park, there's no actual line where one ends and the other begins. And on the schematic of the trail plan, some of those trails come extremely close to those property lines. So in the interest of time, I would maybe suggest consideration for getting input from the neighbors and making sure that they're okay with this, because while it is the B Street jumps, right now it's has low utilization. It's has zero development, so if we develop a full trail park there, it's going to see much higher utilization, and I think the neighbors need to know about that before we approve it.
So we're starting to discuss this issue. I think the takeaway would be just your position on that, and I respect that position. So it's really just kind of fielding, do we want to have a workshop? Should we get some council approval for doing that?
I think I'm going to propose that we just put it straight to a business meeting. We don't need to put it on a workshop. We can discuss it at a business meeting. Would you guys agree to that first, the next meeting? Yes. Okay, I'm seeing all hands on deck. Okay. Any other review of public comment? Okay. Committee motions?
Yes, there was one from the Tourism Advisory Committee, motion recommending council reopen parklets for those businesses that are interested. Call to action, you've already provided that direction. There was a motion from the Urban Tree Advisory Committee. Motion was to recommend council designate the 4 coast redwood sequoias at Martin Park as heritage trees, and also a motion to designate the cork oak at the water treatment plant as a heritage tree. Action to you would be to provide us direction to bring forward a resolution at a future business meeting.
Okay, well, I think we have taken action on the parklets yesterday. As far as the Urban Tree Committee, is that something that you're interested in hearing at a future meeting, or?
Sarah, I'm over here.
Valerie, you have a question, or?
No, I don't have a question. I just think it's a great thing. I think I'm honored that we have a tree advisory committee that is as active as they are. We have an urban forester, and I'm just really excited that Tree City Grants Pass has become active again in those regards. So I'm very much in support of bringing forth a resolution.
Okay, I'm also seeing a nod from Vanessa. Is there a third counselor who's interested in having this on a future meeting? DJ, thank you. We will talk about that at a date in the future. And council liaison reports. Valerie.
Yes, I have a couple of them. Committee of Public Arts, and that's for Arden, which is COPA. I was there at my last meeting, and they talked about, they had somebody come from the Sister City Committee This year is the 30-year anniversary of our sister city relationship in Russia. And of course, with COVID, nothing has happened in the last couple of years. But one of the things that they have been doing, because they are having virtual meetings, is they're trying to arrange a bear swap. So they would like to have us build some sort of bear to send to them, and they would send some sort of bear to us, and we could honor that sister city someplace in a park. So they were bringing it to the Arts Committee to kind of ask if they were interested in coming on board to helping to design that bear. So that was just kind of fun. So there was an interaction there that will continue. They were, I think, meeting this Friday or sometime with the sister city to talk about it. But the key was they wanted to do something in metal, which, that's a really heavy bear to send to Siberia. So that was something that needed to be refined a little bit. But anyway, so the conversation was beginning. Then we talked about the goals and talked about the strategic goals that went through. And I talked to you, Aaron, about the fact that there's a couple of members that have come to talk to you about maintenance because they have done some research on some things that need to be maintained. So I sent them directly to you. And then they want to get started with the art box. They've already received a grant from the Josephine County Cultural Trust for a stipend to send. They would like to get 5 done this year, a stipend to help pay the artists. And now they're going to go to the Four-Way Foundation and try to get some money for the paints. So they're doing all they can to kind of try to go out and get more funding from other sources as well. They were excited to see that, that we were moving forward and wanting to go forward with another parking lot. So they're looking into that. So that was from the Committee on Public Arts, and I handed it over to Vanessa. She was there, so look forward to that transition. And then I've just been meeting weekly with a destination marketing organization, the DMO.
Hang on real quick, Valerie. Can I get a motion to go past 9?
Oh, yes. I would
From Valerie,
make a motion.
second. DJ, thank you.
Okay. So then the DMO, which is a destination marketing organization, is meeting on Fridays. They just came out with the bylaws. They're a big pile at home to read by Friday morning, and the EIN. And they're putting together the application and a press release to go out, I think, this next week so that they can move forward. There's a 13-member board with 2 government officials that are ex officio. And then this Friday, Aaron's going to meet with us talking about the contract. So there we go.
Thank you. I forgot to have you all vote on continuing past 9. So all in favor of continuing past 9?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed?
Going past.
All right. Got that in under the wire. Thank you, Valerie. Were you done?
Basically it. So those
Okay.
are the 2. Was the Destination Marketing Organization and COPA.
Okay. Thank you. Further, Vanessa?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the Josephine County Emergency Management. It's an organization or a group that meets quarterly. So some takeaways is Josephine County will have a vaccine call center, very similar to what was implemented during the Slater fire, if you guys are familiar. It's a centralized location for people to get information, kind of like, lots of people calling in. So this will be surrounded by the vaccine implementation in our county. I believe the community health director at one point said that there may be as many as 6,000 to 8,000 people a week being inoculated. So people will be calling in for eligibility. The city county is currently working on updating their operations plan. This is the exact opposite of an SOP, a standard operating procedure. This is going to be an emergency operations plan. This is kind of the who, what, when, how for state, local, and federal mobilization around emergencies. Let's see here. This is kind of new and exciting. Josephine County Court is actually a pilot court for text reminders 7 days before a court case. The idea behind this is that it may help to reduce the failure to appears that occur. District 7 is working to get rapid testing on the school grounds to allow in-person attendance. And I think that those were the main takeaways.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I had my first Bikeways Walkways Committee meeting, and the committee voted to continue with their current chair and vice chair for this year. They had a committee member step down, Paul Hart, who has been on the committee for 6 years and did a lot of good work on the committee, and everyone was very appreciative for his time. The main topic of discussion during the meeting was the area around the fairgrounds and Allen Creek and the highway crossing there. There's some concerns from committee members that it's difficult for pedestrians and bikers to navigate that part of town. And there's going to be some further concerns with future development of the fairgrounds. They were talking about the development of the east end of the fairgrounds, where currently the OSU Extension Service is, and some other county offices, I believe Public Works, Forestry, and that are over on those east side of the fairgrounds. And I guess the plan is to develop that as the new fairgrounds entrance in the future. So that's a pretty major change to that area. And so the Bikeways had some discussion around that. And they decided to have Bob Lang, who's the vice chair, be liaison to, I guess, UAPC, so he can kind of keep the committee keyed in to what's happening as updates come for that fairgrounds project. They didn't come to any resolutions regarding that area of town, but I think they're going to continue to discuss that. And then the one last thing they discussed was possibly updating the bike and pedestrian city map. I guess it's 6 or 7 or 8 years old now, so they began a discussion to consider if they wanted to request an update to that map. And that's it.
Thank you. Further council liaison reports? Joel?
I had 3, and they're very short. First, the tree committee, they've been fairly active, and they're doing a good job. There's 2 heritage trees recommendations coming, one on the redwood and one on an oak down by the water treatment plant. This next one was very interesting. I may have brought it up previous. The Japanese are giving us a tree seedling, ginkgo, from an offspring of a tree that survived Hiroshima. And we're going to plant it down at the water treatment plant through the courtesy of administrative staff on the city. Ginkgos are kind of weird because they're male trees and female trees. They don't have the same species on a tree, so you don't, and we don't know yet whether it's a male or female. If it's a female tree, the fruits stink. They smell just like the water treatment plant, and they're poisonous. So to pets. So Jason has agreed to put it behind the fence, and I think there's going to be a plaque associated with that. There's also going to be an article, I think, with the Oregon Department of Forestry. So hats off, Jason, to helping us facilitate that happening.
I just want to add one thing. It'll be planted at the wastewater treatment plant.
Wastewater treatment, yes, yeah, excuse me, yeah, because it smells like the wastewater treatment plant, not like the other plant, yeah. Okay, and, sorry. Okay, the other thing that's going on with the Parks Committee, besides their committee motion for the jumps and the maintenance at that item, that would be a small dollar amount. We brought up the master plan, and they discussed it, and they're going to bring it up at the next meeting. And that'll probably be a motion coming forth, and to take some action on the master plan. And then finally, the Council on Economic Development, an additional item they brought up was, and it's a priority item, and I think it's something that probably needs to come before the council when it's ripe, and it's getting ripe, is the airport runway extension. I know the county is associated with that, and they're looking to the city to help finance part of it, and it's a significant amount of that will be grants. So there would be a sizable match through grants of what the city would do, and I think it would probably expand the business opportunities for the city, the infrastructure that provides for business expansion. So, anyway, kind of exciting. And I don't know if it should be a female or a male tree. I don't know. It's, both of them are interesting.
We'll do a reveal party and find out. All right, are there further liaison reports? No. Okay. Just anything from mayor and council comments? Rob?
Just briefly, just to give Aaron a heads up, I think Brian made a great point about the B Street jumps and the fact that anyone who's been over there and sees that there's no fence, it's kind of a strange situation, quite frankly. So I think when we're looking at cost estimates, it may be prudent to think about what that actually would cost to improve that, but also put a fence up, because it's very strange over there the way it's set up now, if you've seen it.
Joel?
I just have a general concern, looking at it from 30,000 feet or 2 feet, whatever. The world tends to polarize us. Social media tends to do that. I've been looking, my kids said, Dad, you need to look at this video and the social dilemma. So I looked at the social dilemma, and where people make money off of us by keeping us engaged on social media and actually polarizing us and trying to sell us more products. And I would encourage you to watch it. But one of the things I think we need to be even more in our relationships, because relationships precede substance, and we're dealing with a lot of tough matters, and not everybody's going to agree, and not everybody knows all the time the right answer. That respect and to resist that polarization that can tear us apart and is not good for the future of this community or for any of us. And so I will support any of you in any position you take, and you're right to take that. And I will try not to put you in an awkward situation, because I don't think that's appropriate, and I will not feed that polarization.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I just had two things really quick. And this, I actually heard this at a committee meeting, so this wasn't for me, but I'm forwarding this, I guess, on their behalf. A person on, oh gosh, I don't even remember which committee meeting it was, but what they said is they were concerned that our middle housing survey was English only, and I was thinking about that, and I'm pretty sure that should probably also have been offered maybe in Spanish. I know that would be a prudent thing to do. And then also that maybe should have applied to the postcards that we sent out for the council vacancy. I do believe those were English only as well. So even if it was just a link to a Spanish version, something like that, maybe would be good to consider on future communications that are important and we want community input on. So I wanted to make that point. And then the other one was just a quick question on my favorite topic. I wanted to see how close we are to getting these meetings on YouTube. So I wanted to know if there was an update or an estimated time when we can expect that.
I'll be providing council with some information as soon as I have an update for you. I don't have anything at the moment. We've been working on a number of other higher priority issues.
Vanessa?
I feel really fortunate that as a council, we have been allowed to continue to meet in person and to protect that while we are in extreme risk and we are navigating a pandemic. I would just like to encourage universal safety practices to everyone within the council chambers, and to encourage, if possible, more cleaning in between committees that come in and do use the chambers, and just be mindful of others. Thank you.
Any other council comments? Staff comments?
I have one topic, and this is because I'm trying to be responsive when council provides direction when it comes to the level of service. We still have 2 GP Nows scheduled to be printed, although in the future, coming up the next fiscal year, in order to save money, we're not going to be printing those. Our next one's actually scheduled to be going to print here in the next 2 weeks. And as to be responsive, I figured the second one for sure, that's the last one to be scheduled, we'd probably just not print it because that was council's desire. But on this one coming up, I just didn't know if, I didn't want to get into a big debate. I'm just asking for some general good guidance. Would it be good and prudent for us to continue with the printing of this one and call it the last one? It has a number of articles about the value that public safety provides and other information that'll be going out. So just looking for guidance on whether or not you want me to just pull the plug now or if you want to do one more last print.
All right, let's just vote on whether to publish one more issue of GP Now. If you're in favor of publishing one more issue, say yes. I'm seeing yes, unanimous, one more issue.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you for asking. Any further staff comments? No? We've worn you out. Yes. All right, in that case, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Valerie. Second? Rick? Thank you. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? All right, 9:12, we're adjourned.